Hello and welcome to episode 211 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 20th of October 2017. I certainly don't want to turn around and find out. My name's Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Pip War.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hello.
18th.
18th?
Is it?
Is it? Oh yeah. Wow. Well, actually, by the time people listen to this, it will be the 20th. So in some ways, we're both right. Or both wrong, depending on your point of view.
No, but objectively, I'm right.
Objectively, you are correct, yeah. Yes. If you haven't been paying attention, it's been quite a newsy week. Newsy week in terms of things we care about.
I haven't been paying attention, so I'm just going to be
informed.
informed.
I'm looking at you as I say this, Pip.
Yes.
So we should start at the top with the hottest, latest Zach Bart's news, which is that he's only gone and done a game again.
Yeah. Zach Barth is the creator of Infinifactory. No.
Yes. And we're getting in early with the things we're not sure about, but we started saying.
I suddenly worried that was Factorio. But
no, he's Infinifactory.
Space Chem, Infinifactory, and now Opus Magnum. Which looks a lot like a sort of much more polished and tactile version of Space Chem in that you are making chemicals, kind of, but the theming is you're an alchemist or using an alchemical device to sort of transmute things in impossible, maybe magical ways. But on a sort of fine-grained level, you're sort of placing like mechanical arms that pick up these molecules and sort of push them into different slots. And it's all very like polished brass and looks very shiny and nice. You are kind of making a machine that will produce this thing. And so it involves picking things up and rotating them and fixing them to each other and moving them around. So it's a Zach-like, which is the genre that is named for him.
But also maybe a 3D soccer bond. The Alan Hazelden game I'm thinking of, where you make molecules by combining different elements as you push them around.
Soccer bond. Yeah, I remember that.
What came first, Space Chem or Soccer Bond? Given that they're both about the same thing.
No.
Which is an interesting kind of...
I think Space Chem.
Soccer Bond was that was the year that The Guardian started doing E2 because Keith couldn't get to E3.
Oh, yeah.
So whichever year that was.
I feel like Space Chem was like a long
Space Chem was 2011. Definitely. 100%, because it was one of the first games I reviewed professionally.
I think that would be first then. And I didn't really get into Space Chem, but for some reason this one is really appealing to me, and I think it's just because it looks more physical. It looks kind of, I'm making a machine that's doing something. Whereas Space Chem I think was a bit abstract and therefore felt like programming to me, which I do enjoy, but I can do programming and have a thing at the end of it if I just do actual programming rather than playing games that feel like programming. But yeah, I liked Infinifactory, and this feels like maybe like a sweet spot between the two, where it's got the sort of tactileness of Infinifactory and the feeling that you're producing this machine and making it efficient and cool, but simpler to sort of interface with. Infinifactory is a whole first-person game that you're trying to maneuver around and place things in 3D space, and that's inherently more complicated than just placing down these levers and stuff. That is out in early access by the time you hear this, I believe. I think it is the 20th or the 19th. And I think I'm going to play it in early access. Not because, usually I don't do that. Usually I wait till games are done. But this one, it feels like it's going to be so clear cut whether I'll like it or not. Like I need to play it for like 20 minutes and I'll know for sure whether this is a game for me or it isn't.
So it's called Opus Magnum.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any logic behind that name, does that mean something different in Latin than Magnum Opus?
No, I mean, as far as I remember, it's about like the endings and things. Like there's a certain amount of structural like sense or like how you actually piece a sentence together, but like it's more the endings of the words that dictate their relationship with each other.
Right. A Magnum Opus.
No, but there is importance to that.
Magnum Opus is your grand work, right? Your biggest.
Whereas this is simply works great.
Maybe that's the fun. Because it works great. Yeah.
Maybe it's about if you can rearrange elements in any order and it doesn't matter so much in the game logic. then that's a thing. I don't know. I don't have an end to that thought. Just a beginning.
Did you, you played Infinifactory more than me, I think.
Yes.
Did the gifs of this and the trailer of this tingle your Infinifactory sense?
Yes. Like, I think you're right that it's obviously a Zack-like. And I liked Infinifactory because it was a sort of tactile 3D thing, and the 3D-ness of the environments could be used for sort of slightly different element of puzzle solving beyond pure efficiency or pure understanding. You could not quite jury-rig things, because a lot of the time you kind of have to get it right or it's not going to work. But there was a scope for solutions to be genuinely mad in that game. And also I think the theme had some kind of playfulness to it, like some of the things you're being asked to do. There was a story in Infinifactory of all things. So I really liked that. And obviously this is a move back towards, it feels like a move back towards kind of more straight up puzzle solving. So I don't know, because my experience has been that every other Zach Barth's game is for me. Right? Like, Infinifactory was, and then the programming game, whose name I've forgotten that we didn't mention. Yeah, was definitely not.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is my turn again. So I guess, yes, it is. And I am. In answer to your question.
Cool.
I don't like 3D puzzles. They annoy me. I get cross with them.
Well,
they feel messy somehow.
2D?
I like 2D. I thought you said it involved like rotating things and like doing...
Yeah, in 2 dimensions. So
okay.
I think you have like sort of molecule combinations where you have like a sort of Y-shaped arrangement, and then it needs to arrive in the solution in a different way.
Going in 3D. No, I'm into this now. I've done a full 180, which is possible in 2 dimensions. So, you know.
So technically all rotations are possible in 2 dimensions.
And in 3.
But I did it on 1 axis.
Okay, right, yeah.
I wasn't making full use of 3D space, basically. I was thinking that you would probably pick me up on that. But
it was a pedantic thing to do, and I'm sorry.
I was waiting. I was hoping that we could I was hoping that maybe you wouldn't twig until after we'd moved on to the next thing.
Speaking of twigs, there are certainly twigs in the video for the new Team Fortress update.
Yep.
Are there?
Yes. It's like in a jungle.
Oh, okay. I really haven't. I've been in Canada. I've seen twigs in real life.
You got back a week ago.
Less than a week.
You got back 6 days ago.
Thursday. Yeah, but then I was really tired, and then I watched League of Legends.
Okay, fine.
To catch up with things.
Fine.
And then I was working on a magazine, so I don't have to.
All right, we get it. You've got a job.
I can find out about them a month later.
Yeah. That's how this works, right?
No, actually, for a magazine, you need to know even before it happens, so that you can have the news in the issue that comes out.
I'm the worst at this.
Anyway, it's I think it's called the Jungle update or something.
Yeah.
But it's it involves a new short, which features Saxon Hale, I think for the first time, voiced and...
First time he's had a voice. Well, the TF2 comics characters have been kind of starting to appear in the shorts. But this is the first time, given that he's a relatively significant character, this is their, as the more time that passes, I don't know how funny it is that he is from Australia, as a joke. He's one of the sort of TF2 side characters who appears in the comics a lot, who's a huge shirtless Australian man. And that's basically the joke.
And he owns Manco, which is the company that kind of makes all the weapons that you buy, and also, I think, employs both of you, or at least one of you.
Yeah. Yes, the mercenaries are working for both sides of Manco, I think. I can't remember. Those comics are really good, but yes.
There actually is a backstory to this, but we just can't remember it.
But yes, so there's a new TF2 short. It's not the best TF2 short. It's just...
No.
But it's fun.
It's about Yetis, and it's sort of to announce a map which is set in a Yeti park, but all the Yetis are dead now, so now it's just Mercenary Park, and it's just I think it's kind of a Jurassic Park kind of vibe.
Yeah, they couldn't be going harder for the Jurassic Park thing, even though that makes no sense because that's not the theme they settle on, which is also a very TF2 thing to do.
Started with Jurassic Park, changed it to Yeti Park, killed all the Yetis, then just made it a park.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're doing it's a proper big update where they're doing sort of new announcements every day for 4 days about it, and the video shows, like it announces this new map. It also briefly shows a pyro using a jetpack, which is exciting. That has not been actually announced yet. We're on day 2 now. So day 1 was like the, Mercenary Park level, which is Valve made, plus a whole bunch of, community made levels that are also jungle themed. So I think they must have like released the sort of assets for jungle stuff early and asked map makers to do that. And I can't remember if there's anything else on day 1, but day 2 is
like mostly like taunts and things like
yeah.
yeah.
Where you can like destroy a Yeti. Oh yeah, those are good actually because they're all like
cardboard cutout
destroying
Yetis.
like a wooden cutout Yeti, and then the scout's one is he punches it and just breaks his hand,
and then it explodes anyway.
Yeah.
There are also taunts where people turn into Yetis, and they do use the slightly wonky Yeti model from the animated
Yeah, it's a
short.
strange one. It looks kind of like a costume, doesn't it? Like it looks kind of jointed in a way that I can't tell if that's supposed to imply it's a costume or
It's just a low-res Yeti, Tom.
just looks strange. Day 2, I was excited about this because I thought like, oh cool, there's like pirate jetpack, there's going to be all this weapon stuff. And also like, in the back of my head was, I haven't played TF2 for a long time, but I'll come back for this. This sounds like worth dipping into for. And yeah, there'll be some weapons I don't understand, but, I can catch up. And then the announcement of day 2 is just like, started reading it, and with each new ticket system it mentioned, I got further and further from feeling like I understand anything about TF2. They don't even say, like, it's contracts, and apparently that's the thing I'm supposed to know what they are. Like, if I was a TF2
remember
player,
them.
I would know what a
I
contract
can't remember what
is.
they are.
But there's new contracts, and so here's how it works. You buy a pass for the contracts. Now some contracts are active, and you can choose which contracts you do via a branching tree. And then when you do the contracts, you get another type of ticket that you can then redeem for war paint. And war paint is not paint, and it's also not weapons, and it's also not crates of weapons. It's a kind of third kind of ticket, which you then redeem for any weapon that would then have the paint that would have been in the thing. Like, it's so abstract. It's 3 layers of ticketing.
an RPG now.
Well,
I mean, kind of.
Or a loot box RPG.
Yeah,
So,
they went pretty heavy on their loot stuff.
yeah, I mean, the loot box, that's loot box ground zero, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk where this came from?
No, but I mean, in terms of the contract, that sounds more like a quest system.
It's a lot like
an RPG kind of thing.
So, I don't know what came first, Dota's Battle Pass or TF2's contract system. But they're basically the same thing.
Because I wondered if it was more like, do you remember there was an event in Dota a while back where the Nemesis event where Phantom Assassin was
the Manifold Paradox
assassinating-
thing, yeah.
No, I think it was called the Nemesis event, that specific part of it, where they had like a contract out on particular characters' heads, right?
Right, yeah.
And you would kill them to sort of fill them up in a graveyard or like as part of the event, right?
Well, TF2 did this with the Soldier and Demoman update. They did both classes at once and had a war going on where like all kills that soldiers made against Demomen counted and all Demomen kills against soldiers counted, and they had a global tally for it. So with contracts, they are things you do while you're just playing the game normally, like in a
Yes,
Monster game.
they're like achievements. Like,
The thing I couldn't figure out was a lot of it sounded like the old Manco Robots thing, which was a co-op campaign where you bought a pass to it and then you killed the robots with your friends, and then by doing that you earned special loot and stuff that you couldn't get elsewhere. And this seems to be that same system, and they call it a campaign, but it did kind of sound like it was just a thing you do while you're playing the game normally. Because then they mentioned that this time, they support co-op for it, which means that when you're playing with a friend, you can both your actions count for each other's contracts.
Right.
So you can
That's cool. That's a
help
cool
your
idea,
friend
Steve.
fulfill.
Yeah, I'm assuming that it's stuff like kill a certain amount of this or do a certain amount of that or use this weapon for this amount of, that kind of thing that then...
yeah, it is.
yeah.
It is battle passes from Dota,
It's
basically.
great. I'm interested to know if this came from somewhere else or whether it's a Valve invention, this idea that you buy you buy the ability for it to matter that you do a certain thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing you're already doing anyway. Like Counter-Strike's weapons that track your kills, that's like a really desirable trait on a weapon is it tracks your kills. You could already do the kills. You don't get anything for doing the kills, but you sort of purchase this thing that, that just lets you acknowledge that. And obviously the compendium is like that. And,
I wonder if it was in Facebook gaming first or like casual gaming.
Yeah, because
like there's a lot of stuff to do with timed events in things like that where, you know, stuff that you would have been doing anyway to keep playing the game suddenly has a window of time where it matters more, and you'll maybe get some buffs or incentives to get you playing again in that time. And
yeah, because I remember Valve said TF2 is kind of like their sandbox for this for stuff they're not sure that doesn't fit anywhere else and they want to try, and they're always worried that something is going to come along and completely make them irrelevant. So the reason they added unlockable weapons to TF2 in the first place was World of Warcraft was huge back then, and it looked like MMOs were going to take over the world, and they were like, God, if MMOs take over the world, we've never done an item system, we've never done level ups, we've never done anything like that. Let's put something like that in TF2 and try it. And then by the time that was in there and running, it looked like free-to-play mobile games were going to take over the world. And they're like, well, we don't have any free-to-play games. Like, how do they work? Let's try that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this, like, pass system comes from that.
I think it's also a way of monetizing games where you don't actually sell any kind of content, quote unquote. Like, TF2 gets closer because weapons actually do change the way you play. But it makes sense for both TF2 and, like, they couldn't sell classes in TF2, right? Like, that kind of thing. Same as characters in Dota. It's like you pay for, like, the plus version of the game for a while. Like,
well, it wouldn't be unheard of because in most other free-to-play MOBAs, you get the free character rotation and then the others you have to earn or buy.
Well, exactly. But that's, I think, why, this is the way that they sort of encourage you to spend £7 every now and then, because they don't have that option available to them.
Oh, for sure. But I'm just saying that it's not that they didn't when they started. It's more that, you know, as in, like, it's a way that they could have gone with it and chose not to for reasons and, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose TF2 was never designed with that in mind because it wasn't originally a free-to-play game. And although Dota was free, they probably had to consider, the community would never have taken to it if they'd gone with that model, so.
It would be, I think, hard with TF2's classes as well, because there's so few of them that they kind of have hard counters. Like, if you had spies and no pyros, it would just be like,
Yes, exactly. So, but what I mean is, I do think that in terms of like, I don't know what you'd call it, non-mobile free-to-play, I think this idea of like a timed pass where you spend a couple of quid on a ticket, which makes everything in the game like quote unquote mean more, is a Valve thing, I think. I might be wrong about other companies have copied it, but I think it was TF2 and Dota that did it first, but I might be wrong about that. So it's a little bit podcast voice, but, I don't think I can think of another company that did it.
I mean, because are you saying outside of like free to play and mobile and stuff? Or
yes, on these sort of like online service games where like Dota.
I think, isn't that just because so many of them were just already charging a subscription fee? It was when subscription fees wasn't the way forward, right? Or weren't the way forward. Right?
Yeah, right. I suppose as subs fees for MMO started to break down.
Because, like, if you were paying your subs fee for World of Warcraft and then they were suddenly like, and now we're going to charge you for a Christmas event, that's not going to fly. Whereas maybe if it had been free to play and then they'd charge you for their events, then, you know, that would have been, or not would have been, that's like retro engineering history. But, the fact is there was most things weren't free to play at the time except mobile. So, I think you're not going to find other examples from that.
Well, no, but there was things like League of Legends, right? That had like.
It might be interesting if you looked at like Asian free-to-play games, like
yeah, maybe
MMOs and things like that, because maybe like they would have had specific ways to get money out of people in like as part of events rather than just like items. Or I don't know. I don't know enough about that scene, but I know that there were different monetization models happening.
For sure.
Just to complicate matters even more, the thing you get that tracks your contracts is like an iPad, and it's also a cosmetic item, so you can just sort of attach it to your character, which is bizarre. I'm kind of curious about this stuff, but I guess I'm probably not going to engage with it because I don't think I'm going to pay for a thing.
Yeah, no.
That sounds kind of dumb considering I've got a crazy amount of value out of TF2 without paying hardly anything on it. But yeah, it just feels weird to spend money on a thing that I don't think I'm going to like.
Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable consumer assessment. This company is not trying to be your friend.
No, I don't mean like from a guilt perspective, but just it seems kind of silly to be like stingy about TF2, just given how much I've got out of it.
It can be, I think, when you're coming back to a game as well, you're less likely to get excited about this kind of thing because you're getting a lot of new stuff as it is, right? Like, you don't need to fully invest to feel like you're getting mileage out of simply returning to the game and exploring the new stuff. Also, news this week is Overgrowth is out now.
Yeah.
I didn't know it wasn't. I'm not going to lie.
It's been in some form of access. Yeah. I don't want to say early access. I'm not 100% sure. No, I think it was. It was on Steam Early Access. It's a rabbit kung fu game from Wolfire, who are some plucky young developers who I met God knows how many years ago. And around that time, they decided to put their game Overgrowth in with a bunch of other little projects, or maybe it was Lugaru, the previous one, and a bunch of other indie games in a thing called the Humble Indie Bundle, which would prove pretty successful.
That's the IGN thing, right?
Yes, now it is. Which proved very successful to the point that several of them left the company and sort of made that its own company. But meanwhile, David Rosen and I'm not sure who else has been just continuing work on that same game ever since. And so the entirety of Humble Bundle as a phenomenon has started and culminated in the recent sale to IGN in the time it's taken him to finish that game, which is I think 9 years.
Jesus.
And it's out now. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre game.
It's a game about anthropomorphic animals kicking the shit out of each other with quite violent hand-to-hand and weapon-based melee combat. It's weird. It's like, I played Lugaru again recently for a PC Gamer thing. It's neither cartoony nor realistic because they're sort of quite realistically drawn but unrealistically proportioned animal people.
And the physics is just wildly exaggerated.
Yeah, and you couldn't say it was a fully realistic combat system because everyone can jump a million miles in the air because they're rabbits and that's how that works. And gravity seems quite low a lot of the time. So there's a sort of...
I went to a rabbit show jumping championship.
So you've basically got the idea of the game then.
Imagine that.
I was just thinking that they can't actually jump as high vertically as they can jump horizontally.
What would you say the ratio is there? Height to length?
I am going to go for like 2 horizontals to 1 vertical.
Okay.
So, cause
that's a well-rounded jump.
But although some of them could jump really high, which as evidenced by their performance on the circuit.
What would you say a human's jumping ratio is? I feel like I can jump.
Humans actually just ran around next to the rabbits, so to be honest with you
couldn't observe
they weren't even jumping.
I feel like I can jump more than twice as far as I can high.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I think I can jump a good 8 times
in Lugaru.
Further forward than I can up.
8, wow.
Yes, 8.
Pip could jump a really long way. You wouldn't think it.
Very short height.
Yeah.
Really tight hamstrings.
Pip can only jump when she gets like a context-sensitive jump point level.
But then it's
I don't have my knees.
Yeah.
Does that include if the gap is far enough that you have to kind of cling on to the other side and pull yourself up afterwards, like Prince of Persia?
Oh, no, I would have said it's from where like in school when you have to do the into the sand pit,
The long jump?
Yeah.
In school or the Olympics?
No,
it's a long jump.
I mean,
like
you
the long
can
jump.
do a long jump without there being a sand pit. That's not one of the conditions of doing a long jump.
No, that's true.
In Tomb Raider 1, the world was made out of 1 meter cubes. And so every jump was either 1 meter, 2 meters, or 3 meters. And
that's a long
way. I wouldn't swear to the actual figures, but one of them, let's say it was 2 meters, you could jump and land on your feet. And 3 meters you could jump, but you'd have to hang on to the other one. But it was actually it was also an engine limitation, but it ended up being a really good level design tool, because it meant you were never ambiguous about, can I make that jump? It was always like, oh, that's clearly 3, or that's clearly 2.
That's cool.
And yeah, basically single-handedly Uncharted. I was going to say discovered, but what I meant to say was, well, discovered the Uncharted series, or Uncharted, the Discovered series.
So this rabbit thing.
You can jump really fucking high and far. I've just killed myself jumping. Just literally. Yeah.
Like rabbits, it's sad, but sometimes they just jump 80 feet in the air.
God bless their enthusiastic little hearts.
It's like how sometimes people say that if fleas were human-sized, they could jump over a house from a standing start.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. And it tells quite a serious story of like rabbit betrayal and violence and vengeance.
It's a weird mix of like extremely funny slapstick violence and then like quite serious
vicious
plot.
Yeah. Lugro as well, actually. It's like the logical midpoint aesthetically between the film The Raid and Watership Down.
Yep.
I haven't seen either of those reference points. I'm so useless today.
Not Watership Down, Pip. That's the one that surprised me.
No. Why would I? I've heard it's sad.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. So's The Raid, actually. Bit of a tearjerker.
The Raid of Watership Down. I assume similar things happen in both of them. Cool.
Yeah. It's the highlight feature of Overgrowth for me.
My mind has just tried to make the pun mixed martial arts and mitosis work.
That's ambitious.
Yeah. It doesn't.
The highlight of Overgrowth for me is the kind of animation and physics to the movement. Like everything is very physicsy in terms of your limbs actually collide with stuff, and when you're running over uneven surfaces, they adapt to that well, and you pick up momentum. Reminds me almost a little bit of like what I liked about N originally, way back in the day when platformers didn't have so much in the way of momentum. It's if you're running like downhill, or if you sort of do a jump and then you land on a downward slope, you can pick up insane speed, and you see your little legs just going absolutely crazy because they have to keep up with the real speed you're going. Whereas a sort of more traditional approach would be the player has a speed of 15, and that means the animation will look good at this rate, and we've checked that. Whereas this is like the physics system decides how fast you're moving and what's happening, and the animation system just has to deal with it. It's like, oh fuck, I've got to make the legs happen. And yeah, you can do that to the point that you just literally kill yourself. Just break your legs on the ground and smash yourself around the scenery. And because that's what I enjoy about it, that's what happened to me. I just killed myself multiple times.
Do you ever have that stress dream where you're running downhill and can't stop?
No.
Okay. I thought that was the thing everyone does. That's just me then.
You could have gone with mixed MMA-tosis or mixed MA-tosis.
Mixed MA-tosis is the one that works, I think.
Well, it's because you might go with mixed MMA-tosis because mixed maybe doesn't work in the...
but doesn't the first M in MMA stand for mixed?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But like MY, you could because you're not going with mixed... I'm not sure which would work better. I would
You go for the fighting game community thing and go for like mix-up-a-mitosis? I don't know.
We need to A/B test this one.
We do, or not at all. So you don't like ever have that thing where you fear that you'll ever go downhill and keep accelerating until you die?
No, I did actually. I once ran down like a jetty for boats that was sloped like that when I was quite young, and I fell forwards and just like scraped all the skin off my chest. It was like one of the worst injuries
I just clenched
had as a kid.
Everywhere.
And so I should have a fear of running too fast downhill, but it doesn't come up in my dreams.
So why is it called Overgrowth?
I don't know. Well, actually, no, these rabbits are far too big. They should not be that big.
Oh, okay.
Much smaller.
Take them through a vet.
So it's mutant.
So this rabbit is far too big, and it's wearing trousers. That's
So there's no plants or anything. It's not like that kind of overgrowth.
It is set in some natural environments, but actually, yeah, can't really speak for the sort of the story campaign. I played it most sort of, I don't know, 4 years ago or something, relatively late in development, a mere 4 years ago. And the version I played had these really cool, actually surreal environments where there's sort of like, natural terrain, like grassy hills or, weird, red mountains. but then the actual structures you're kind of playing on would be these big geometric, stacks of cubes and stuff arranged in a sort of not very, functional way, like very sort of arty. And I think it was kind of a platforming test because it's also got like parkour and clambering and all this stuff. And messing around on that was kind of fun. It seems to be going down well, actually. It was on the front page of Steam, at least. I haven't checked whether it was in the top sellers, but the tweet announcing it was full of like people just going, "Oh my god, I can't believe it." People saying like, someone saying, "This is the first game I ever bought." Like,
and now it's out.
8 years ago, yeah.
Jeez. Well, congratulations to them on finishing a game I thought was finished.
I wonder how they knew it was finally done. I wonder what kicks in now.
I think the story campaign was the last thing to be made. So it was like the game mechanics were all there for a long time, and then that was just a certain amount of content that had to be hammered out.
Slightly sadder news, and pretty, I guess, big news this week is the closure of Visceral, who are the company that made the Dead Space series and were most recently working on a Star Wars game for EA. They were announced alongside EA's announcement that they had the Star Wars license. And this is the game, as yet unnamed, that Amy Hennig of the Uncharted games went on to do. And I had, a little bit of buzz. They hadn't shown very much other than like some nice, like 3 seconds of a game at some point of a man in a coat walking through a town with a huge Star Destroyer hanging over it. But Visceral are all of a sudden no more. And the game is being, I have the quote to hand. So the game is being shifted towards a less linear experience. To read the full quote.
They're pivoting, aren't they?
They're pivoting. They are pivoting. So let's read the full quote. It was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game. Throughout the development process, we've been testing the game concept with players, listening to the feedback about what and how they want to play, and closely tracking fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we needed to pivot the design.
Gotta pivot that design.
Some days you just gotta pivot a design.
I like the mention of like player feedback and marketing trends one after the other there.
Yep.
It feels like it's a license for them to sort of actually obey the market trends, but blame it on the players. People were crying out for it to be.
It feels very pointed this week because everyone's saying like, no, there's no confirmation this now means it's going to be an open world game or something, but everyone's thinking along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reaction to it has been like, a single-player game's dead, which is a line that's been trotted out.
No, it's just that single-player games will have loot boxes in them.
Yeah.
Well, or there'll be a different value proposition because if it's more worthwhile in terms of the financial return for a company that has shareholders or whatever, like if they're going to spend that much time and energy on something and they could choose between a single player thing that people will play maybe once or twice or a thing where people will theoretically sink 100 hours into and come back loads and, maybe in the manner of Overwatch persuade their friends to get into or in the manner of any other game, if it isn't paid to start with, season passes and loot boxes and cosmetics and all of the others. I mean, it makes businesses. One of the interesting things for me in that thing is, as you pointed out, there's the kind of like the implicit linking of the player feedback and the final result, but also there's an element of they say, oh, well, we've heard what people want, but then they don't actually say that what people want is to come back to it lots and lots. They've just said that in order to make people come back lots and lots, we need it to not be this format. And so it's like, it's actually a really interesting exercise in phrasing. Like I would use that for an English language paper, like I think you could properly dig into that for a GCSE and like, the way that language is structured and how you can manipulate it. So
yeah,
I think it's interesting because this is happening the same, a couple of weeks before Battlefront 2 comes out. Battlefront 1 was a game that was very much sort of service game, season pass, no single player proportion, like designed to be a game that you pay for once, then you pay for again and you return to. Battlefront 2, has a linear single player campaign as a result of player demand based on the first game, or basically as a result of John Boyega demanding it on Twitter. And it has a multiplayer component that doesn't have a season pass, where the updates will be free, but it's supported by loot boxes. We spoke on the last episode about some of the concerns about those loot boxes. But the thing about this, which is weird, I mean, apart from the fact that it implies that different parts of EA aren't talking to each other, which would not exactly be news, is that, if you want your single player game campaigns, pray they have a multiplayer mode. Because if they don't have a multiplayer mode, then apparently there is pressure on publishers to find a way of getting longevity and microtransactions and things into the single player, which is presumably pushing things towards open worlds and RPG mechanics and collectibles and things that will sustain loot boxes. Whereas, as far as I can tell, there is no, like, Battlefront's microtransaction system has no bearing on its single player, which is the kind of thing people want when they talk about a single player campaign. So it's sort of interesting to me that, like, the best fate for a single player campaign is to be bolted to a kind of feature rich multiplayer service game, because otherwise those business practices will just feed through into the single player campaign itself, which is also true of the Mass Effect series, right? Like, when that gained multiplayer as a vehicle for microtransactions, and those microtransactions then didn't touch the single player campaign. And I'm glad that happened, right? I'm glad they weren't selling loot boxes and things for the single player version of that game.
There was a little bit of like, exclusive armor and stuff if you pre-ordered.
Yeah, well, they sold DLC for the single player, right?
Yeah.
And that had new loot packs and stuff, but nothing like a random box of stuff and now you've like Tally's got a hat on or something, right? Like they didn't do that precisely. Whereas they did sell loot boxes for the multiplayer modes. It's just an interesting thing, right? Like, I don't know what they're going to pivot Visceral's game towards being, but it does kind of suck a bit, particularly because they'd hired people like Amy Hennig, who is known for storytelling and is known for kind of this kind of linear storytelling.
And I think they said it would be a different lead. Like they said they're still talking to Amy Hennig about what her position will be, but
like Steve someone.
Steve.
As in, I think that Kotaku had like a leaked email or something with, an update on the, who would be leading the team and stuff like that. So I apologize if that isn't your name.
Wars.
A relative of Pip's, maybe.
I apologize if you are not Steve, but I think you might be.
Apology there to all non-Steves. Yeah, when they announced it, it sounded like they kind of wanted a Star Wars Uncharted, which would be the thing you would hire Amy Hennig to make. And now it sounds like they don't want that anymore. They did Uncharted 4 underperform? I don't think it did, right?
Don't know.
I just wonder, when the industry responds to one of these things, I always wonder if, like, you said last week, like, if the reason for loot boxes being so all the rage at the moment is a GDC talk 3 years ago. Was there a GDC talk like 2 years ago about like, don't make this!
Don't make Uncharted.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like something that is interesting though is that if these companies are, if a thing spends a while in development and the market seems to be shifting and they want to pursue what they think is going to be a sort of an ongoing trend towards, for example, these games as services and things that need to be hungry to the point of vampiric for your time so that they can also feast on your lovely wallet. Is it going to be a cause for concern that companies who did that, Gearbox with Battleborn and Cliffy B's company, whose name escapes me right now,
Boss Key,
that's the one, with Lawbreakers, like, both of which followed that model, kind of.
Lawbreakers is very much the Overwatch model.
Well, yeah, and, they both had, like, a base price, right? But they would have had, they're built with the capacity to have that longevity and to have new modes, new things. Like, definitely there was a cosmetic element in Battleborn and a premium currency and things like that. And I'm not sure about Lawbreakers, but
well, the only reason I bring up this distinction is that I think Battleborn was its own thing to some extent because it had premium currency and also paying for the game and that kind of thing. Whereas,
but so does Overwatch.
No, it doesn't. Overwatch doesn't have
pay for the game and you
there's
buy loot boxes.
You do, but there's so this might be splitting hairs, but I do think the Overwatch model has been specifically copied by games that didn't necessarily have like a full currency and a full internal kind of like XP boosters and things like that.
But what I'm not saying that it was being Overwatch. What I'm saying is that if people are hitching their wagon to this particular game format star, then, you know, the fact that two games that have had variations on, you know, like trying to do that hungry for your time thing, like that sort of repeated matches and, you know, trying to absorb people into this ongoing thing that then maybe encourages them to spend with the game. Like I say, I'm not sure about Lawbreakers, but obviously it's a multiplayer match made prospect that obviously was intended to have a significant player base, right? That, yeah. So, I mean, they failed, right? Or, you know, I don't want to write off Lawbreakers entirely at the moment. It's more that, like, that's going to be a cause for concern, right? For people who have maybe pivoted towards this stuff, finding out that actually there isn't infinite demand for this stuff, that there isn't infinite space for all of these games and all of these like demands on people's time and money, and like there will be a saturation point.
You always see in my fear is that like it's just a big company thing. Big companies are terrible for just keeping their shit together and being focused. There'll always be someone who gets into who gets promoted and is like, right, we're going to shake things up. We're going to, you know, go in this bold new direction. And, they get control by making this case to the higher ups that, oh, I understand the market. I understand the trends and we're going to follow those and we're not going to do this, waste time in the old ways. And, then they swoop in and change things. And that's why so often, like, people, like a company will buy something, they'll acquire another company and they'll promise nothing will change. And you almost want to believe it because you kind of think, oh, why would they buy it if just to destroy it? And then they fucking do destroy it 2 years later because management changed and they just changed their priorities and it's just a shift in the gears. And, so the behavior they exhibit is just seems completely bizarre from the outside. Like, why did you invest so much in this thing if you don't want that thing? Like, it seems idiotic. That's one explanation. The other explanation is maybe there was like trouble with the project. Maybe it was just not shaping up fast enough. I mean, they don't say that, but.
No, it's kind of, it's one of those things that's kind of impossible to know, I guess, until you maybe start hearing people's experiences or, you know. And
I bet, like, I don't know if it was like how much of an Uncharted like game it was, but I bet a game like Uncharted just looks like garbage until it's done. Like, it relies so much on polish and cinematic stuff that it's not going to be like, oh, it's a rough prototype right now, but you can tell because of this interesting gameplay mechanic, it's going to be amazing. It's not going to be amazing until it's all there.
Well, no one's going to play that.
Yeah, we'll play something maybe.
Yeah, we'll play something else somebody else will make. But it's a real shame.
I mean, that's a weird job as well, isn't it? Coming in to the
bones of the project.
To be fair, you don't know it's a real shame. Like,
might have been
well, no, but it's a team with a really good history and like.
Oh, for sure. Like, I don't.
It's a shame we didn't get to see what they did.
Yeah, like I don't want to like you know, do down the work that anyone did, or you know, the fact that it was people who I think would have done interesting things. I think it's more just that like there's an interesting, like if something doesn't get made, then people can put a lot of emotion onto it that you kind of will never know whether it deserved, you know?
True. Although I think when a team is like, I would say I think it is legitimate to say I would like to have seen what the Dead Space people did next, and I would like to have seen what Amy Hennig did with the Star Wars license.
Oh, for sure. I think I'm just feeling really detached from, not from the industry exactly, but just from like the I really don't feel kindly disposed towards corporations at the moment, I think, because of, I think, I don't know, a load of conversations have not endeared me to a lot of parts of ways of thinking about games, recently, but I think I'm finding it quite difficult to engage with, projects as if they are also the people who are involved in them, if you see what I mean. Like, the people are separate from the
Right.
from the work in a lot of ways, and it's like I wish the people well, but I'm sort of a bit detached from the things that seem to be causing the problems in terms of people getting emotionally invested in them to the point where it becomes unhealthy and spills over into online interactions. But I don't.
Yeah, it's so rough to be in that position because 95% of everyone working in the games industry is probably not working on their absolute dream project. Like, they're probably a lot of people are at companies they're really excited to be at, and are very happy to have the job they have. But that's different to sort of the ideal situation, which is working on a thing that you passionately believe is the best it can possibly be and does not suffer from any kind of corporate interference that then compromises it in any way. And yeah, I have a lot of friends in the industry who are just in tough positions where the thing they worked on failed for reasons that were completely beyond their control, and but they can't help but care about it. They're so invested in it and they put so much love into it, and their contribution to it was really good. And so they can't help having their emotions tied to its fate, and then it bombs for some other reason, and they have to feel bummed about this, even though it's not their fault.
That's why I really love talking to people about, for example, their, people from the art team and stuff, because then you do get to consider that stuff, not in isolation, but you get to really sort of dig into the work that a person or one sub-team did and what they're proud of or what was difficult or, things like that. And that's quite an interesting way of experiencing a facet of a game. Whereas if you're sort of, I don't know, I think as well there's been a lot of talk about, for example, the loot box conversation, which I won't rehash, but there's this kind of interesting, a company is made of people, but it itself is not a person, and it does not have your best interests at heart, and it isn't your friend. It's that, I hope that I'm getting that across rather than just seeming like I'm in a jerk mood. I genuinely wish those people well and would have really been interested to see what they came up with. It's more just a kind of, there are a lot of knee-jerk responses in the industry that have been troubling.
Yep. What have you been playing, Pip?
A Mortician's Tale.
Sunny.
It really is, actually. It's lovely. It's a little game where you play as a mortician who is working at first in a family-run business, and it sort of later gets taken over by a sort of big death business. I don't know what the big pharma, big death, big mortis,
big reaper.
Yeah, that's good.
Kind of company, and as this character, you perform the tasks of a mortician. You prepare cadavers for funerals and for burials, for services, for cremations. You sort of learn about the equipment involved and the processes, but also you have a little inbox and you get messages from your friend who works in a pathology museum, and you get messages from your boss or from the people who are using the funeral directors. And so you sort of start to get to know the world, or you sort of get snippets of information via the little messages in your inbox, whether they're from your character's friends or colleagues, or just even the funeral newsletter that she's been subscribed to, things like that. And there's some absolutely fascinating stuff in there. And in terms of the way it plays, there's a lot of sort of, it's quite a rigid linear structure to the story, and the interactive parts, you're usually sort of going over to a thing, whether that's, a coffin, or whether it's to, a door or the computer to answer your email or whatever. And the actual parts where you're interacting with a body are a lot more like, those browser games where you need to, clean a Disney princess's face before she goes to a ball and she's got loads of zits and you have to like pop them and then put her makeup on and like, all of that stuff.
I've seen ads for these games.
Yeah. Or like you're presented with a pregnant frozen princess and you have to like deliver the baby, or, or someone's got a really mangled leg and you have to pick out glass and like bandage it.
Frozen pregnant princess one a real one?
Yeah.
How does the delivery work? How much is Frozen?
Like,
no, she's from the movie Frozen.
So basically you just do a bunch of quite abstract tasks really, and then like the baby just sort of appears on your tummy, like as it's been birthed, there's no sort of genitalia or anything, and nothing so troubling as an episiotomy or whatever, but Google that. Maybe don't. Don't know. But yeah, so it's kind of more that format of you get given a set of tasks that, represent the basic work, but they've been heavily simplified and it's quite rote and the game sort of leads you through them. So for example, the first one that you get is a woman who, has died and the family just wants a closed casket, like, service and burial, and so you don't need to embalm her for viewing and things, and they have like environmental reasons for not doing so, and so all you need to do is wash the body, so you're sort of using your mouse to drag like a sponge across like the grubby body kind of thing, and then it's sparkling clean, and then that's done, and then you send it off to your colleague to dress her, and then you attend the service, you pay your respects, and then you move on to the next thing. And then you sort of, as the game progresses, you encounter sort of different versions of things. So, for example, you might have like a viewing. So you might have to embalm the body. And so there's like, you need to, like there's a guy that it gives you, and so you have to shave him. And then like it's things like you need to, I can't remember the exact order, but it's like you sort of shave him, you wash him, you put like these things called eye caps in, under his eyelids, so that it not only, creates the impression of full eyeballs, if you see what I mean. But also I looked them up online, and they're often kind of lightly spiked so that they'll hold the eyelid in place, and sort of shut. And then you also like glue the eyelids, and you have to massage the body as well, because like otherwise, because you have to get like break rigor mortis is what it's called. So.
For the eyes, what state are the real eyes in at this point? Do they deflate?
I think it's more that, because after death they kind of sink back, and I was trying to find out what exactly happens, and the reading that I found online was slightly unclear, but I think it's maybe a mixture of like dehydration and muscle slackness and things like that, so it stops sort of having them like they sink back a little and things like that. And but I'm sorry if this is upsetting for anyone. It's not intended to be, because the whole game is geared around the death positivity movement, which is a thing that you might be familiar with if you are on particular sections of the internet. I thought it was a lot more widely known because I happen to be in that sort of connected area, but you might be familiar with things like Caitlin Doty's Ask a Mortician, like YouTube series where, people could like ask questions about, the sorts of things that she would know about. And like she sort of discusses them in a matter of fact and really approachable kind of interesting way. But the idea of death positivity is it's not like super looking forward to it, but it's kind of the idea that society has kind of become phobic of death almost and tries to hide it away in a really unhealthy way that kind of makes it harder for us to understand, to engage with, to grieve, to move past things, or to like incorporate it into the fact of life, you know, and sort of trying to sort of open that back up in interesting and helpful ways. And there's other sites like, so, Caitlin Doty's particularly involved with a site called The Order of the Good Death, which is super interesting. So I would definitely say go check that out. But there's also, I think Sarah Chavez, writes and runs, Death and the Maiden, which like I think they had in Winchester like earlier this year. There was like a conference, and so there was a lot of like interesting sounding talks. I couldn't go, but about for example particular like death and gender kind of topics. So like the gendered aspects of like end of life care and things like that. Anyway, so that's more to sort of say why it's not just sort of weird or gory. It's kind of like, I think the creators of the game were inspired by those particular people and those particular websites and the idea of that movement. Anyway, yeah, so you go through these tasks and you prepare the bodies and you sort of, and your character moves through this arc of like, you know, from the firm being this like family run sort of intimate thing where people can, you know, for example, mourners don't have to like be upsold to and things, like through towards like more of a corporate thing, and then like it goes on from there.
Do you become Big Death?
So I don't want to like it's quite a short game, and I don't want to like, well, it might be obvious where it ends up, but I think it, and because it's quite rigid, it's kind of like, I did wonder whether some people would find it like troublingly so, like, oh, I'm just doing everything that the game tells me to and I don't get any agency within this. But I think it's more that it's a really, really good tool for like just sowing seeds of things that are interesting about the ways that people are finding to deal with death, or like ways that you might want to consider or talk about, or, you know, while you are planning for your own funeral, or for, you know, we want to talk about it with relatives perhaps, or and so, you know, like you get an email from your friend in the pathology museum who mentions mushroom suits, and like she only sort of mentions it in passing and says that she'll send you a link later, and obviously, you know, time moves on, so you don't see the rest of that interchange as it maybe would have happened. But like, obviously the first thing I did afterwards was just Google mushroom suits, and I was like, what is this? And it's like, there was a firm who makes this thing called the Infinity Suit, I think, and it's like,
I heard of this, yeah,
it's this jumpsuit that's kind of infused with this biomix that is supposed to like, you know, there are some mushrooms, there's like other kind of organic microorganisms basically, that the idea is that mushrooms, well, fungus is good at like breaking down toxins that might be in the human body, so things like heavy metals, you know, and that therefore having those as a biomix that then starts to like
take root,
propagate off the body, or so, you know, like that's probably not the correct terminology, but would be like a useful and more environmentally friendly, you know, thing to do as part of your burial process, because obviously,
This does sound like the most amazing superhero origin story, where they get buried prematurely in the Infinity Suit, and then all the fungus takes root, and then they become a plant-based superhero, bursting from the grave.
But yeah,
basically Swamp Thing,
right?
And there was stuff like, and there was a similar email that like made me Google water cremation and stuff like that. Which I mean, obviously that sounds like a
contradiction.
Yeah. And it kind of is. And I think that it's more that it's easier to understand as a process that then still leads to you having, I think, ashes. And it still involves like a a machine that you put the body into, and then it kind of goes away. Because essentially, well, I mean, because instead of fire and the environmental costs of the, generating that heat and, all of that.
Because it's incredibly difficult to reduce a body to ashes, right? The bones do not...
Well, this is the thing. So, in the game, you will use a cremulator, which is the thing that you put the remains into after the burning process, you're left with bones and things like that. And so you take them out and you put them into this thing called a cremulator, which is what reduces it to that ash-like substance, which is also, because it's not ash, which is why it's got that slightly different texture than fireplace ash. Well, if you've ever scattered. Anyway. So it's one of those... But anyway, so with water cremation, you would have like a heavily alkaline solution under pressure. So it's like you can heat it, but it won't boil. And so that breaks down the majority of like the body, over time. And then you'd still put the remains in the cremulator. So you'd still have, that thing to give the relatives at the end, in an urn and things. But I wonder if it's also better for things like pacemakers and things, because in the game you have to take out a pacemaker because the battery would explode otherwise.
Oh my God.
Exactly. And so, but like, I wonder if the same thing would happen in like, superheated alkaline solution, or whether you actually could. No, I think it would still be dangerous, right? You'd still have to take them out.
I can't imagine.
But I think that there was some interesting thing where it's not only using less energy than like either a burial in terms of like the overall environmental cost or, cremation. But I think someone was saying that like it also leaves intact the medical, like, prosthetics that you might have had, like, like artificial hips or knees or things like that, which could maybe theoretically be repurposed in, in other surgeries or for new patients and things, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure how accurate that is, because maybe the alkaline would do damage, it's corrosive, so...
It sounds like in general it's better for the environment to be buried, is it?
No, I think that they did. So I did an interesting thing with like, someone had done like a shadow cost analysis, essentially working out things like, what the cost of a burial was and things like that. Because obviously you need, or not obviously, but you need the wood for the coffin or the casket, and then you also need the cotton for the lining. And if you've had the viewing of the body and you've needed it to be embalmed for some reason, there's like formaldehyde in there. There's like so much in the way of chemicals, in the way of, like all of that kind of stuff. And so anyway, so that's, I've sort of forgotten where I was in terms of explaining the game, but
the whole thing is just really interesting to me. So it sounds like a game worth playing for that reason.
I think that's the thing, is that I think if you go in expecting a super interactive, like multiple choice thing where you can feel your own agency in terms of what the character is doing moment to moment, that's not what you'll find, and you will probably not enjoy it. But where it really shines is as this tool for opening up those conversations and for just sort of leaving a really interesting thing, as maybe a friend who was super into that stuff might send you, that email like, oh, this is a fascinating thing, like, or just drop it into conversation when you're out at the pub. Like, maybe if you're just friends with someone like me who does this kind of thing, like, did you know? And so I think the nicest thing for me is where my agency was in choosing what I wanted to follow up on afterwards, like the internet rabbit holes that I disappeared down into, and, how it sort of like opened up some of those topics of conversation, but also just sort of demystified some of the funeral industry as well. Like, some of it is a bit uncomfortable, some of it is clearly geared towards a certain way of approaching burial. And I kind of wonder how people who've had a different experience or who value the maybe they'd had an experience with a more corporate entity and liked that. I don't know if you would feel criticized for for that in this game, or maybe you'd been pressured or something. But so that might be an interesting one. But I think that I think as a tool, it's interesting and sensitively handled, and it's obviously deeply simplified, but I think that that's necessary. And I also think that the lack of player choice in the moment-to-moment things was maybe necessary to ensure that it will never be disrespectful towards, for example, the bodies in your care, because you always go into the relatives room kind of area, and you always pay your respects to the deceased, and you always kind of there's no option to not do that, and so I think giving people video game levels of choice would maybe just not be appropriate there, because people are just gonna
jump up and down.
Well, yeah, jump up on the table, kick the sandwiches, and not out of malice, but just because you can, and it's a video gamey way to behave. So I think sorry, I've been wanging on about that for a whole. I just find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Also, Google death beads. So, they're really interesting too.
Okay.
What have you been playing, Tom?
Shadow of War, still.
It's definitely called that.
Yep. Pretty sure. Which I've got into the Nemesis system stuff now, which I hadn't before. I'd got access to the army before, but I couldn't turn any captains to my side. Oh no, wait, I totally flipped captains last episode. I forgot where I was. We talked a lot about captain flipping. But I just got to that, and now I've it really gets much bigger, much quicker. There's I think there's 5 regions, each with their own army, and I've now sort of conquered 3 of those. It's weird. The Nemesis system is held up as one of the great bits of design in in AAA. And it is really cool, but I always feel I felt it was a little bit last time, but because it was new, I was more forgiving of it. And now even more so, I feel like it is hinting at a game that would be way better than the game that they've actually produced, which is, it clashes completely with the idea of, badass, grimdark, incredibly powerful, hero. They want you to be that, and they also want you to care about the orcs that you can flip to your side and what they get up to and who you send them against. And basically everything you can do with your orcs, you can do much better yourself. And sending them to do that, without your assistance is it's just strangely balanced. I was playing, I was doing the odd campaign mission. I don't seem to be forced to do those anymore, which is good. But I have been dipping into them just for see what they're like. I usually hate them. It is one of the worst games I've ever played for you strayed outside the mission zone thing. The mission zone is insanely small. You're following somebody and you walk 10 steps away from them to pick up some arrows, and it's fight, mission failed.
One does not simply walk 15 feet away from
yes,
Mordor.
Exactly. And there's been in a boss fight, where you have to shoot this flying enemy, and I've run out of arrows, so I walk over to get some arrows, and mission failed because you went outside the mission zone. They're fucking out. Why are they there then? So that's not fun. But because that was so frustrating, for one of those fights, I put it down to easy, and it's called campaign difficulty, so I thought maybe that only applies to the campaign missions. But after a while of playing, I started to realize, no, that has affected, the Nemesis system as well, because if I send an orc, if you want to get them to be a war chief's bodyguard, which is a good way of taking on a war chief if you have one of your guys secretly being their bodyguard, because then they'll betray them when you confront the war chief. To do that, they have to fight an arena battle, and I can't remember how it worked in the first game, but in this one you cannot intervene with those at all, even if you want to ruin the whole thing and just to save your guy's life, you can't do that. So it's literally just a cinematic thing that you watch. But it is like AIs fighting each other. It is dynamic in that way. And, they're kind of fun to watch, except after a while I started to realize like, oh, I've sent a guy in who's like 6 levels lower than the other guy. And, the other guy cannot damage my guy. It's just like, he'll hit him with a really good blow and you just can't tell if the health bar's gone down at all. And then my guy hits the other guy once and it's like 10% of his health off. And so at that point I started to realize this is not working on this difficulty. This is just meaningless now. It doesn't matter what I do. So I've cranked it up to hard now, which is, not at all how I want the combat to work, because it introduces a load of just bullshit things where like sometimes you can't, you get a captain down to when he's broken, which is when you can flip him to your side, and then you do the drain move, which is what does that, and it just doesn't work. And I'm just like, I don't know why it doesn't work, but on hard mode, sometimes it just doesn't work. And I'm not sure what I should do or change to do that. And I'll be fighting like a guy who's vulnerable to beasts, and I've summoned a Growl, which is the fucking enormous, gigantic, I don't know, ogre-like thing. And my Growl was just like pounding on him again and again and again in a corner, and he has 0 health. There's no detectable health left on his health bar, and the Growl just never kills him. And I don't know why. Something's going on there, and it's full of stuff like that. It's just full of weird little quirks, and I think hard mode is worse for that, like, because everything matters so much whenever there's a thing where you just, I don't know why, setting fire to this mortally fire vulnerable guy did not in any way hurt him. That stuff is life or death on hard mode. So I don't want to be playing on hard mode, but if you play on easy mode, then, the Nemesis stuff becomes meaningless. You can't get your guys killed if you wanted to. And I was playing on medium for most of it, and that was, it still got too much of an advantage for your guys. You put them into these battles, and it just feels like a very strange to the extent to which they missed the opportunity here, which to me, the interesting thing is like, I want to care about the orcs and I want, when I flip orcs to my side, I want to put loads of thought into which ones I pick, and then I want to put loads of thought into what I do with them. And that thing where you fight in arena battles to get a war chief position, that happens both if you want them to become an enemy war chief's bodyguard, but also once the war chief's down, to put anyone in that position to replace them, they also have to fight a battle like that. And when you do that, you don't get told which orc they're going to fight. And so that means there's no logic to who you put into that battle. Just whoever, your best guy, I guess, the highest level, whatever. Doesn't matter what their strengths are, doesn't matter what their weaknesses are, just the best one you have generally, because you don't know who they're fighting. Whereas that seems like such an obvious opportunity. Tell me who they're going to fight, and then I can pick one who's like, oh, this guy's got a fire attack and he's vulnerable to fire, and that would be great. But you can't do that. And then the fact that you can't intervene also seems like a missed opportunity, because it would be such a great moment if you put this guy in the fight in the hope of, becoming the war chief's bodyguard, and he's sort of undercover. He's just pretending to be someone who's vying for this position. And then you realize he's going to lose. And then you'd have this moment of like, do I jump in to save him? How important is this guy? Because if I save him, everyone knows he's on your side at that point. In fact, maybe that's why they don't let you, because they just can't handle that. Like the idea of a chief that everyone else knows is on your side. I mean, it's a complete farce because, people can watch you turn the chief to your side, and the chief says, I now serve the Bright Lord in front of everybody. That doesn't blow their cover. Yeah. But if they were in a fight and you save them, that would blow their cover. And also every other situation, like anytime any 2 war chiefs fight, you can intervene and save one of them. Like, you can send one of your war chiefs to like raid the other, war chief's, feast, or draw him into ambush or whatever, and in that situation you can totally jump in and save your guy at the expense of the other guy, and that doesn't blow his cover. So yeah, I don't think there's a good reason that you can't do that. And
it seems the reason that Pokemon trainers can't just kick the shit out of the other person's Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just the actual, there are loads of interactions you can do with the Nemesis system in terms of like sending orcs against each other. As far as I can tell, you just never need to do that. There's never really a reason to do that. If you want to flip that orc, you don't really want your guy in the mix because they might kill them before you can get a chance to do that. And if they're not powerful enough to accidentally kill them, then you don't want them in the mix because they'll probably die. And so you have so much agency, you're just so powerful, and you need to be there to do everything yourself, that your orcs just feel a bit irrelevant, and it feels like that the thing that Nemesis system wants to be, which is like putting together this cool team of unique, individual, randomized, captains who you've chosen for their special traits and then using them in ways that make sense for their traits, just doesn't come up in the game that they've made because of what the actual things you're trying to do are fairly straightforward, and you are the primary instrument of those things because they want you to feel like a cool, badass hero.
Do you think it's a single thing that is at odds with that design? Is it the fact that you are also a very powerful hero in your own right that stops the orcs from being meaningful?
I can imagine a version of this where you still are, but there's a reason to send your guys to do things instead of you.
Right.
Just things that, like, it has this weird, sense of turns. It actually calls them turns, where the game is not turn-based, it's real-time, but certain events are scheduled to happen, and those events will only happen if you show up and activate them, or if you don't do that, then if you die, or whatever event you do show up to and activate, that causes all the other ones to progress. And if there was a load of things that it was important and beneficial for my captains to be doing, then that would probably work, but there isn't. Like, sending them against another captain doesn't get me anything. Killing another captain is not even really a good thing, because what usually happens is a better captain replaces them, and they're not on your side, so really you want to turn them to your side, or you can shame them, which makes them lower level. That kind of, I've been treating that as a way to, like, weaken the army overall, because now they're just taking up space, basically. They're kind of shit now. No one can replace them while they're, I suppose someone else could come in and kill them, but, you know, I think some of that stuff is happening, I'm not seeing it, and then a lot of the time it's just not happening. And either way, it doesn't end up being relevant to what I'm actually asked to do, which is take out these war chiefs and ultimately take over the fortress, which I can just do really easily, by just manually killing all these people, or manually turning them to my side.
You persevering with it, though?
Kind of. I've played it a lot now. I've played it at least 16 hours. I think maybe more like 20 something. I think it's because you can work towards something. Like, you see that army and you know what you're trying to do with it, and you make progress quite slowly, but you're sort of always thinking about the next step. And so it's kind of addictive more than it is really enjoyable or interesting. And
so you're saying it's a game that you'd like to return to again and again?
Unfortunately, this is, I mean, it's got loot boxes. I've used the loot boxes now. I didn't pay for any, but they give you, some premium currency, and, I think you're forced to spend it. I think you just, like, you can't progress until you go to the marketplace, at least. And, then you've got your 500 gold to spend on some crates that have orcs in them. I don't know how that works.
Just poke an air hole in.
I hope they'd already done that. So I think I've still got some of those, because it's a very strange system. Like, when you're playing the game, it's all about, you're showing the army, and it's about how you manipulate that and take people out and turn them to your side. These extra orcs are just, like, in a box. So you can take one out and put him somewhere, but it feels weird to do that, because it's like, that's not really how the system looks like it should work. And then you can also, I've got, like, training orders, which means I can take an orc, I already have, and give him a poison weapon, that's what I've got at the moment. You can buy other types, but, that part kind of works. Like, that's, if that was just a thing that, the fact that you can pay money for it is, not interesting to me. But the fact that I have a limited number of these things, I just spent the premium currency they gave me, I'm never going to buy any more, so this is all I'll ever get. And the decision of, like, which one of these guys do I want to upgrade is pretty good. I, picked someone I liked because he'd happened to have saved my ass, and then gave him a poison weapon, and now he's my best guy, and I send him to, take him with me on any mission that I'm worried about difficulty on. I really wish you were just an orc in it, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, particularly because a lot of stuff they've added kind of contradicts this idea that you're, like, dominating them. Like, you do this, you brand them with your hand. You hear, like,
brand.
Burning flesh as you, like, sear your mark into them and enslave their mind. And then the first game, that was just it. They were just yours forever. In this one, they've added loads of stuff where, like, if, the story I told last week was about some blood brothers where one of them didn't like it that I hurt. It completely fucked up because the game's very, ropey in that sense. But the intent was, even if you've dominated this captain. If you hurt his blood brother, he'll flip on you because he's still like, he can still think for himself. And so that just makes so much more sense if you're just an orc who is just
persuading people.
Yeah, you beat an orc in combat to the point that he's not dead, but he's nearly dead. And you would just have the option to like, intimidating him to join your side. And that's totally a thing orcs would go for.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense for orcs. And then it would make more sense when they betray you. Cause they can, if you attack their blood brother, they can betray you. Some of them are just resistant to it. You just do it, you try and flip them to your side and they're just like, they're too strong-willed, which again would make more sense if you were trying to intimidate them and they were like, no, I'm just really...
Rather than your magic hands.
Yeah. I just really believe in myself. I'm not coming to your side. And then they can also, there are some quite nice bits of logic in there where, I was fighting a tough enemy when I had it on hard mode and he sort of got me down to the sort of emergency recovery stage where usually they try and finish you off and then you get to press a button to get out of it. And he didn't do that and he humiliated me, which is, he just says, no, I'm not going to do this. This is too easy. And that's the humiliation. But it means you don't get the recovery thing. You just get back up and you have low health. Which wasn't interesting in itself, but it caused one of my flipped orcs to just suddenly show up and say, oh, if the enemy don't even respect you, how can I respect you? And so changed to his side.
You don't respect me. I've magically branded your mind.
Exactly. Like, it would make so much more sense if I was just another orc who I had intimidated him.
Yeah. Or just a human man, a regular non-half elf ghost guy. Anyone, really.
I think if you are going to do like this sort of magic stuff to flip people to your side, I mean, it's gross, right? You're sort of violating their mind in a really skeevy way, and there are all sorts of racial connotations that are not at all good. But I was thinking about this because, like, loads of games have this flip people to your side spell, and it's never felt quite this awful. And
well, normally it's framed as like hypnotize or something. Like explicitly, like they're under a spell.
And traditionally, the spell is called charm, which makes it sound like a nice thing. You're sort of persuading them that you would. And I realized,
just fight their friends to the death.
For me, the version of this that is sort of a lot more morally palatable is if the spell is to basically impersonate somebody that they do respect. So, like, if this spell made you look like Sauron to them, and then you told them to do something, it would make perfect sense they did something, and it's not really like violating their mind, or branding them, or doing something really horrific. It's just a bit of trickster stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. You're right, though. I totally would play just the Orc Middle-earth game with quite no huge sort of mythology kind of requirement, just orc business.
It would be kind of amazing if you were just like, Talion's like half human, half magic elf. If you're just like Talion, but in an orc costume. He's just like cosplaying as an orc. It's like slightly lame, but the orcs will just buy it.
Like a little onesie.
Yeah.
I like the idea that maybe like, because he brands them, right? So he must have a really hot hand for that moment. Mm-hmm. So if he was holding a sandwich and then went to brand the guy, he could have a grilled cheese sandwich.
Would the brand still work, or would that prevent the brand?
I'm trying to work this out. Like, and also, like, how long would the branding then take? Because obviously the sandwich would absorb some of the heat. So, like, and the orc might not stay there for a while. But like,
and the mark on their face would just be like a cheese toasty mark. Like if you have a toasted sandwich maker, it has that diagonal line.
Call it the George Sauron grill.
Well, no, because on one side of the sandwich there would be a handprint, and on the other side of the sandwich there would be the orc's frown lines. So it would be a kind of an interesting fusion. I don't
think that's what fusion cuisine means.
Yes, it is.
Oh. And
you could like boil an egg just by holding it.
Yeah, I think if your brand is hot enough, you could brand their face with your hand, then cook.
My brand is Smoking Hut.
Yeah, I tell you, just cooks an egg and the egg turns oil.
I'm also on your side for what it's worth. I know I can't do much, but...
Or you could, like, reheat your cup of tea just by holding it in your hand.
I want to think he can do that anyway. Like, if he's holding a cup of coffee and then he does the brand thing. The brand energy.
Pure brand energy.
Would that not be the most charismatic thing that character is capable of doing? Like,
it would be the first charismatic thing.
Yeah.
Like, I did enjoy Tom S.'s comparison tweet between Lothalion's unmoving Shadow of Warface and his never not moving Shadow of Mordor face.
I hadn't really... I'd registered that he didn't look like an actual person in any sense, and was also incredibly boring. But
That's
I sort
just Lord of the Rings.
And I sort of remembered him being that way in the first game, but actually, Tom
He's sort of hampered by source material in that respect. God, I fucking hate Lord of the Rings.
New Talion's face is just like a mask that just stays impassive no matter how energetic what he's doing is.
Maybe he's had Botox. Maybe he felt pressured by the system.
There are quite a lot of scenes where he yells at a crowd, and that looks really freaky when he doesn't emote in any way.
Botox, man, I'm telling you. Just age naturally, Talion. Fuck's sake. Actually, no, because he's got a ring, so... Well, no, hang on, has he?
Yeah.
No, is he being haunted by the dude who made the rings for the elves?
Yeah, both. He also has a ring of his own.
God's sake. Why do I even know this?
And the ring is upgradable. You can find new...
Are you kidding me?
Epic versions of the ring. So for everything else, it's like, oh, this is the cape that your wife gave you, and then it's like 1 stealth. So if you find something that does 2 stealth, you're like, throw that in the fucking bin. I want the 2 stealth one, thanks. And then it's like, oh, the sword that Talion used in life, and they throw that away, that's shit. The ring...
Well, to be fair, yeah.
The ring you don't throw away, but you get new runes for it. So it's like you find an epic rune for your ring and add that to it, and now once every 35 seconds you can throw a knife that sets people alight.
Is this like when people get their stones reset into a new...
So the very first act of magic item identification in fantasy fiction was Gandalf putting the ring in a letter and putting it in the fireplace to reveal that it has like plus 300 stealth, but alerts all Nazgul within like a 500-mile radius.
It's good that they have a downgrade as well, like, so it's not just a pay to win type thing.
Yeah, it's a lot like the Morrowind crafting system.
I get, why isn't identifying stuff in games interesting like that? It should be throwing it in a fire.
And then it lights up with the...
Yeah.
I mean, because it'd be basically the same thing you currently do, right? Like,
yeah, but just a bit of flash to it.
Yeah, I think it
Instead of like
boring,
use a scroll on it.
What is the game where you discover what a thing can do by using it?
Skyrim, potions.
That's
one of them. That's one of them. There is, I think, I might be getting this really wrong.
Roguelikes often do this. The potions, so potions and cave blazers and, Rogue itself, and also a lot of Rogue descendants will have potions where you have the option to drink it or throw it at an enemy, and you don't know what it does until you do that. And I kind of lifted that for Heat Signature when you're sent to steal something. You never know what it is. It's called like the something prototype, and it is a real item, and it'll be one of a certain number of types with a certain number of traits, but you don't know what it is until you use it. And you're not supposed to use it because you're just there to steal it. But if you're in a tight spot, you can just try and see what it does.
Nice.
Huh. You know, I've never used an item I've stolen.
You're a good employee.
Yeah.
I tell you what though, some loot crates have really elaborate, like, reveal options. Like the Dota one just fucking spins around and does, like, a disappearing act and is all kind of fancy.
Like a shell game
nonsense.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and, like, some of them have, like, a key that will magically form and then fly into the lock and do a fancy twiddle, and you're just like, oh, for God's sake.
It'd be funny if, like, Diablo had this kind of loot box system, and it was just like you get the item and just like lands on the ground, but you don't know what it is, and Deckard Cain has to like waddle over and look at it really closely and say, oh, I think it's a thing of
God, you'd be there for 400 years, wouldn't you? It's just like, especially if you had to have a little chat every time you threw something in the bin as well. It's like, I'd like to get rid of this, please. Oh, are you sure that was my grandfather? Oh my God, just
only
destroy
+1 stealth.
it.
Got plus 80 constitution.
I'm Greaves.
Yeah.
Fucking what? Oh.
Used to be quite easy to do a Deckard Cain impression because all you do is start doing Bane from the Batman films and then remove the mask, and you have somehow Deckard Cain between those two things.
Yeah, I couldn't enjoy The Dark Knight because
He sounds
I just kept thinking Deckard Cain. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much. Sorry. You can reverse any of those lines of dialogue either way. As long as you either add or remove the Bane mask, you either have one of those two characters. That's a fun fact. There you go. Found out what we were doing after 2 pints in pubs in 2012. The height of comedy.
I think it was also in 2015 because I remember having to sit through this.
No, that seems a bit too recent. But you're probably right.
It was that and Christopher Walken.
That was definitely that was a long time ago.
No.
No, it really was.
About 2014 then.
I said The Dark Knight, but I must have meant The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah, podcast voice, which also rises.
The podcast voice also rises.
God.
Yeah. Good times. Good times that were probably 2013, I think.
2014.
Shall we do some questions?
Yes.
Some questions.
No.
Well,
Podcast cancelled.
thanks for listening, everybody.
It was a one vote and you're out thing.
Yeah. Why did we give Pip a veto on all podcast features?
Well, I wondered what would happen if I said no. Like, I'm not actually averse to doing questions, but like, why ask?
Well, it's more to introduce the section.
We could have like a song.
Go on then.
Have you got a question? We've got an answer. It's questions.
Except for the ones we didn't pick.
So, to be fair, I think that given you asked me to do a song.
Yes, that was pretty... I'm sorry that I didn't immediately roll out the Pip is great bus.
Well, no, but why did you have to point out that there are some questions that don't make it on? People won't feel special.
Well, now everyone feels special because everyone had a part of the song.
That's not how this works.
Okay.
It's
Someone-
questions. That's all part of the song, the whole thing.
There's a spoken word bit in the middle, like Gilbert and Sullivan.
This is the breakdown.
Wrap us through the rest of the song, Tom.
No, that was it.
That was a good freestyle. What is going on? Stieg writes, Dear IDKFA and IDSPISPOPD.
What does that mean?
Okay, the first one gave you all ammo and weapons and keys. I can't remember what the second one does. It's not invulnerability because that's IDDQD.
I don't know. There has been hang on, I can read. There has been a lot of talk lately about the tourist mode in the upcoming Assassin's Creed game. This is exciting. I really enjoy the Assassin's Creed games, especially for their tourist in time quality, not to mention their excellent melee combat. He's put an extra hat on the E, the first E in melee, just to get fruity with them accents. I spent the 90s playing tourist mode via their built-in cheat codes. I never skillfully played any FPS such as Doom or Wolfenstein or Quake. I just flipped on cheats and explored the worlds. I have fond memories of exploring SNES games such as Earthworm Jim and Flashback, just to visit the strange levels of the game and see as much as possible without having to perform the skill. I never built in SimCity without unlimited funds. I feel like N64 GoldenEye is a milestone in the mainstream death of cheat codes. That game did a great service of building unlockable cheat code menu, but only after skillful completion of the game. This is the polar opposite of a no-skill exploration-based tourism mode. Of course, I now enjoy the satisfaction of Dark Souls and the puzzle of managing a dwarf fortress, but I'd much rather play Minecraft in creative mode and see the elaborate wonders people build, not to mention the many tours through speed plays and let's plays. Thanks for the travel literature, Stieg.
Yeah, I also played Doom with cheats on when it first came out. I remember we had a lodger staying with us at the moment, a Dutch guy who was working for my dad's company, and he was the only other person we knew who was into games. He was like 10 years older than us, probably more than that. And he just couldn't believe we played with cheats on. And we're like, but look, we just have all the weapons now and we can't die. This is brilliant. And it wasn't like, you think it's going to be cool, but then you play it and you realize it's not fun. We were genuinely having fun with it for hours and hours on end. We just played through the whole game like that, loved it. And he was trying to teach us the virtue of playing without cheats and there being some kind of challenge, and I didn't see it at all. Like, no, I don't get it. That's why I know what IDDQD is and IDKFA. It's interesting, unlocking cheats, I agree, kind of defeats the purpose because, it serves a different purpose, but, it undermines, I think, the more important one, which is, some people just want to play the game that way, And also it's an accessibility thing. There are just, some people just can't play the game in the way that you may have originally intended. And difficulty can just outright lock them out of the game, which is terrible. And I'm thinking about this at the moment because I'm thinking about adding a kind of difficulty menu to Heat Signature to let you turn certain elements off, make things easier. But I don't know, if I just call it like difficulty options and you can change it any time during the game, I think that might have an adverse effect for some people who don't really want to use those cheats, but also don't have strong willpower and just are going to feel like it's just an option and, turning it on makes it easier, then they're just going to turn it on, and kind of cave to that pressure. I don't want those people to feel pressured. I want them to just keep enjoying the game the way they're enjoying it. It's really for people, there are just a small percentage of people who just can't play the game at the difficulty level it kind of wants you to play it at. And I want those people to have options. And so I could call the menu cheats. I wouldn't lock it off. It would just be available to everyone. And then that would be kind of subtly shaming you for using them. But maybe that's a good thing because the people like this questioner and like myself, I don't care if you call what I'm doing cheating. I'll just look for a way to enjoy the game. If there's something I don't like about the game and there's a way to turn it off, if you call that a cheat, it doesn't matter at all to me that it's called a cheat. But I know the psychology of this is very different for different people. I know, I even have friends who they'll play a game on medium or hard and find it too hard, but they won't turn it down. They cannot turn it down because turning it to easy is just a source of shame for them. And so even when they're not enjoying it and they know they would enjoy it, they can't do that. So I don't know what, it's really just, what should I call that menu option in Heat Signature? Is it difficulty options, or is it cheats, or is it something? Mutators. Yeah, that might be something like that might work. I think that's a bit inside baseball for, some of the people who I'm going to hopefully help
options.
With this. We do already have an options menu.
Settings.
Yeah.
Preferences.
That Mutators gets across the thing I want to get across, which is this is an alternate way to play the game. It is not the game. So if you want to play the game, don't use this. But if you don't like the game and you want to change the game, here is a way of doing that.
Call it that.
Just write that all. We make the font small enough, it'll fit.
What's your take on this, Pip? Also,
No!
You almost covered for this. You almost covered for the fact that while Tom was talking, you left your chair, walked across the room, and read the question again off my screen because you hadn't been listening when I read it out.
I listened to so much of it, and then
I hope you also simultaneously listened to my entire answer.
So, well,
because mine was also a question, and I now need an answer for it.
It's because I started thinking about whether melee does actually have a circumflex over the E.
That was what you were checking.
And then I got so kind of caught up in, maybe it does. It feels
does it in Monkey Island?
Familiar. It does. I feel like actually that is not an unfamiliar way of
I feel like that might be right.
And so I was just so caught up in that then I missed the rest of the email, which I should really have been listening to. And then Tom was like, I have an answer to this. And I'm like, I don't know what the question was, given that now seems divorced from the part that I heard. So, but I think, as I have gleaned from trying to listen to you and read a question at the same time, it's about cheat modes and yes, indeed. But about about cheat modes and tourism modes and basically alternate ways of experiencing a game without necessarily needing to do the killing-y bits or the fighting-y bits or the expertise bits, right?
Yes.
So for me, because I sometimes seek out cheats, but they're specifically for things like free camera. So it's not cheats exactly, it's debug mode kind of stuff, or a dev console thing, so that I can actually take the screenshots that I want to of the world that they've given me, but the constraints that they've put to represent the character, the height or the way that I have to move around the world doesn't fit with that. And so I try and find a way around that sometimes. And so things like a tourist mode in a game which has that sort of, parkour element, no matter how inelegant, Actually, to be fair, I haven't played the new one, so I don't know how.
Assassin's Creed parkour is pretty good.
No, it's not. Anyway. I find that it's clunky. I've not enjoyed it. I've never enjoyed it, but anyway. But I haven't played the most recent ones, so anyway, so something that can offer me different ways of interacting, especially ways where I don't aggro anything or don't have to deal with the play side of things, so that I can actually, like, you know, take screenshots or, you know, see elements of the world and actually sort of zero in on them, or see what the artists have done or the designers have done in that way, I find super interesting. And so it's more kind of like, yeah, it's not even about the actual play side of things. It's more being able to take the thing apart a bit and, like, poke at it, or, like, you know, like, take the engine apart a bit and see what was actually going on. But again, that's a thing that doesn't seem to have a word apart from if you go into the free camera of the, you know, the dev console or the command or, you know, whatever else. And so, yeah, I don't know, like you could have, like, a really sort of hipster sounding menu option of, like, alt play. And, like, you know, that could, like...
To be honest, now that I think about it, for heat signature, calling it difficulty options probably will work, because, as I said, the people who are resistant to those things don't want to go to the difficulty options. They would see that as like, oh, that's fucking what the game is, which is what I want. You know, I want them to think that way, unless they're not enjoying it, in which case I want them to go there.
But is it, or would they then seek that, like... Is there a significant tranche of people who are actively annoyed at the idea of playing other than what the medium, kind of the default is? Or is it more that there's, like, a slice of people who care deeply, but they care about whacking it up instantly to the highest difficulty that they can find? Do you know what I mean?
Well, these would all be options to make it easier. So, like, the default difficulty would be the hardest, which sounds strange, but basically the only, if I want to add heat signature structure is such that if I want to add more difficulty, I can do that in game, and it can always be optional within the game. But there are certain global things that it might be beneficial to let people turn off.
I wonder, because, like, as somebody who finds some, like, strategic games daunting, or who knows that they are of a very different play mindset to you, for example, with that in mind, I would open your game, I would see the difficulty settings. If I checked them, then I would realise I was on the hardest and whack it down instantly to what I felt was the medium, if you see what I mean. Because I would be like, oh, okay, well, clearly I will not be capable of the hardest one, or, like, that's not a good way to start with this game. So I will put myself in the, like, I'll put myself a few notches down, interestingly. I don't know.
I think it's going to be, I don't know exactly what the options will be yet, but it'll be something like, there'll be very specific things. So, like, what happens when you die? And, so gameplay specific options that I think will not mean much to you if you haven't played the game yet. And they're there for people who have played the game and then want something specific to change. So, like, Dishonored added this, to Dishonored 2 in a patch, a custom difficulty where you can change everything. And I was excited about that, and then I tried it and then found actually I just want to play on easy. And actually this kind of made me think about it more, because, it's quite overwhelming that, like, it gives you so many options in terms of visibility and enemy health and all the stuff, that you almost feel like it's on you to design your difficulty, which is definitely appealing to some people and beneficial to some people. But it made me realize, for me, I think there's value in restricting those options, not, or in guiding me towards, like, this set is a cool set to try, or...
I think maybe if you did it as flavours almost, so if you wanted, like, maybe not for heat signature, but, you know, for example, if they did it in No Man's Sky, it would be, you know, like the the creator flavor would obviously be the I think they actually call it creative mode. You know, it's the peaceful or something. You know, it's one of those.
That's what I'm playing on now in No Man's Sky.
Yeah, but like you could also just do sort of adventurer, and that would maybe be like particular kind of like emphasis on, you know, the things that are to do with exploring or to do with, you know, like whatever. And then there's like, you know, research, like scientist, and that would maybe favor, you know, like cutting out the things that would interfere with like research or finding those like language modules, but, you know, up the, you know, like it could like fiddle with the variables a bit in that way. Obviously that, you know, like I can just say, oh yeah, and you could just, and, you know, ignore, hand wave all of the complications that take place under the hood. But I think maybe, because games do nod towards this, or maybe it's a vanity thing, like where where the easiest option on a survival sandbox game will be called like peaceful or passive or creative or something, you know, it won't be, you know, loser, easy, baby mode, will it? Like, and so...
There are games that will call their easiest difficulty something like that.
And like, there will be something like on the further end of the spectrum that will maybe call out the players that, or that understands that there are some players that will gravitate towards things that are nightmare mode or, you know, relentless or Iron Man or, you know, whatever.
Deus Ex, I always play Deus Ex games on the hardest difficulty, because they're not really about like how much damage you take. If you play it in a clever way, you don't take any damage. It doesn't really matter. Until the latest, Mankind Divided, they added a new one called I Never Asked for This, which is, I think, otherwise the same as the top one, which is called Give Me Deus Ex, which is kind of dumb. Except that it's permadeath, so you just can't load save games, which is just like, well, that's just more frustrating. That just, for me, that just makes me less inclined to experiment and stuff, because the game is not structured around permadeath. It's a one long linear campaign, so if you die 17 hours into it, that would just fucking suck.
But like, yeah, with those two settings, they both seem to have an understanding of how the people who play them might want to either think about what they're doing or what they enable, or the mindset that they engender when you do take the brakes off in that particular way or apply them in a particular way. So I think maybe, you know, it'd be interesting to see more games experimenting with that as a kind of, you know, here are a few different ways that you could approach this. Almost like builds, but for the actual like game settings rather than the character. And then you could, Anyway.
Next up, Neberjoth writes, Tom F., you have created the perfect game. I cannot stop playing it. It is perfect in every way and has its hooks deep into me. I stress this is written by Neberjoth, an anagram for Tom Francis.
Wait, no, it's not.
He protests too much. I'm terrified of whatever you create next, Neberjoth writes. What will that be? I know it is soon and that you undoubtedly need to take some time to enjoy the success of Heat Signature and to decompress a bit, but can you give us any hints or broad strokes about your next move, Neberjoth?
Until that last sentence, he could have been talking about Morph Blade. Like, just fucking love this turn-based strategy game. No, I don't know what the next thing will be, but I have been tinkering with things already. I have one project going in Unity and one project going in GameMaker Studio 2, which is also what I did after Gunpoint, was do a Unity project and a GameMaker project.
Yeah, so hang on.
The two side by side. And last time the pace of progress in GameMaker proved seductive and I couldn't resist it.
3.5 years later.
Yeah, that's so I was working on a Unity game that was like a side-on heist game, still in 2D functionally, but sort of with 3D models, and only the basic placeholder rectangles at the time, cuboids. And that was the one that was progressing slower, and Heat Signature was the one that was progressing faster, and Heat Signature took 3.5 years. So I haven't been overly tempted to go back to the other one that was slower than that, because that feels like that would take 7 years to finish. So every time with Unity, it's always like, I know this is a better system. I know this is nicer to work with in the long run. I know I'll get myself into less messes and my code will be cleaner and all better organized, because it kind of forces you, well, it doesn't force you to do that, but it encourages you to do that. And the tools are very good for sort of, hinting at how you should write your code. But yeah, my Unity project right now is a square, a sort of slab of land with a rectangular unit on it that you can click on, and then you can right click to tell it where to go, and that's it. That is all I reveal about what I'm doing with that.
Fascinating.
And the GameMaker project is literally just me trying to see how GameMaker Studio 2 works, because I haven't used that before. Came out during Heat Signature's development, and it wasn't worth porting it over. So I've made basically a kind of paint program in GameMaker Studio 2. This, I think, will not be my next game. I think I'm ready to say that. But I made a paint program where, like, when you click, it draws a big glowing line of random color. And then, when you next click, wherever you click, all previous kind of blobs of paint fly away from your cursor. So basically, wherever you click, you kind of push the other drawing off the screen.
Or, like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, or if you click in the middle of it, it kind of explodes.
That's not how Etch-a-Sketch works.
It's how Etch-a-Sketch would work if it could.
Etch-a-Sketch's dream of itself.
Yes. Do Etch-a-Sketch's dream of electric sheep.
Well, it definitely wouldn't work on an Etch-a-Sketch because all of the lines are connected.
Look.
You couldn't physically, this is the one thing that is impossible for an Etch-a-Sketch to do.
Which is why it dreams. And that's
I don't think it can conceptualize separateness.
If an Etch-a-Sketch was dreaming and you wanted to wake it up, you might shake it to wake it up, but then it would erase its dream. That's why you forget your dreams when you wake up.
That is a fucking one-page short story masterpiece waiting to happen.
Well, that's your next game. So
it's going to be a little bit of a departure for Tom. It's going to be a slow, kind of linear meditation on the internal life of an Etch-a-Sketch that is in a coma and is dreaming in ways it can't possibly fathom.
In an upgradable driver San Francisco coma.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that why they get video game amnesia when they wake up then?
Yeah, because you shake them to wake them up.
You shake them and then they go blank, and you have to reteach it life by drawing.
With 2 dials.
Yeah, like in D-pads.
I don't know where that bit's going, but where it's arriving is this question from Kane, who writes, Dearest podcast hosts, is there a game you wish you'd played at a different time in your life? And conversely, were there any games that you played at exactly the right time? For me, I wish The Witcher 3 and the recent classic CRPG revival had happened about 8 years ago. I've started several of them, but laying siege to their towering text walls always feels like an impossible task these days, because of the investment of mental energy and the time that's required. 8 years ago, I was ravenously consuming every RPG I could put my hands on, and would easily have been able to play all of the ones available today, and still want more. As for games that happened at exactly the right time, late in my first year of university, I walked into somebody's dorm room and saw the Galciv 2 ship designer, which is like one of the, like, that's got to be like top 5 most life enriching things you can see while walking into someone's dorm room. I tried and failed to get into 4X games before, but now I had 4 years of lectures and a half to pay attention to, and Galciv 2 fit very comfortably into the other half, and the bus rides home, and the time I probably should have spent working on projects that were due in 8 hours. Regards, Kane. So I resonate personally very strongly with his assessment of the current RPG situation, because there are just loads of them and they're really good. And I'm, playing Divinity 2 at the moment, and, there's a Pillars sequel coming, and I never finished Pillars and really want to. And then the other day, a couple of days ago, I had this feeling like, I want to replay Baldur's Gate. I'm like, no, Chris. No, Tom. No, Chris. I'm Chris. I'm having a Crate and Crowbar based kind of meltdown. And I realized that's not going to happen. So let alone going back and playing games that I missed, or, there really is just not enough time in the universe now. So I would totally have liked all RPGs to be available between the years, 2002 and 2012. That would have been perfect.
Yeah, but what would you have sacrificed?
What would I have sacrificed?
Well, I mean, those things would all take 1 billion squillion hours approx. So
Yeah, I would have messed around less.
that's not true, though.
That's not true.
So
Look, don't etch a sketch my dreams.
My answer to this is also university-based, and I sort of think I would be better off if I hadn't discovered Morrowind right in the middle of my degree. That was my first Elder Scrolls game, and I really hadn't got into RPGs really since Ultima Underworld. Like, Ultima Underworld 1 was one of my first computer games of any kind, and kind of the game that made me realize games could be worlds and could be amazing.
Underworlds, even.
Yeah, they could. They
It could be the ultimate...
the regular worlds. And ever since then, I knew there were loads of RPGs and mega, classics of the genre, between Ultima Underworld and the Elder Scrolls series. But, never got into them because it was always like, they were either turn-based or you had a party of people, or there's always some level of abstraction that took me away from just like being a person in the world. And I remember seeing a screenshot of Morrowind and thinking, oh, that looks great, but I bet you're like a party of 4 people, or I bet it's turn-based, or I bet like when you fire a fireball at someone, there's a dice roll that determines whether it hits. And the more I learned about it, I was like, no, you're just one person. And no, it's just like real time. And no, if you fire a fireball at someone and it hits them, it hits them. I was like, oh my God, this is the game I've been waiting for. And, I got completely obsessed with it. Played it for a ridiculous number of hours. Did anyone play Daggerfall?
No.
That was the one before Morrowind, and like I say, I joined with Morrowind. But if I'd known about Daggerfall at the time it came out, I think I would have been hugely into that as well, because I saw a streamer playing it recently, and even today, it looks old, but it doesn't look unplayable. It doesn't have that look of like, the sort of super early games where, it's still first person, it's still kind of free movement, combat is, rudimentary, but, it's still real time. You still can punch a dude to death. And also it's like the map is just insane. It's like just the size of the real world. And cause it's all procedurally generated. And every like square is a town that you can go to. And yeah, that would have blown my mind if I'd played it at the time.
Yeah, I played Mass Effect while I was at university. It's one of the only games I did play when I was at university. Mass Effect and Fallout 3 on breaks from uni. And those were both very kind of mind-opening kind of, I want to write about games kind of experiences. I think you probably thread a through line from there to subsequent career/life direction kind of things, right? In terms of games that I encountered at exactly the right time, I might say Dota for this, weirdly. So sometimes I wish that, when I was 15, my job after school and weekends was, doing sort of mixed kind of helping out at an internet cafe, basically. Like, I made sure the computers worked and ran the till, but my kind of, the part of the job that I really liked was I ran the games basement. So if you went to an internet cafe in like early 2000s Salisbury and there was like a sort of teenager who ran Counter-Strike in the cool games basement, that's probably me. And we'd run like, LAN games and things, of various things. And I remember, and I was doing that when Warcraft 3 came out. And Warcraft 3 was my favorite game and I loved it to pieces. But I never bothered with any of the mods for it. And I sometimes wonder, given that I'm about the same age as the oldest Dota pros, that what if I'd been one of those people who just gets into Dota All-Stars circa 2002, 2003, whenever the fuck it was, and got super into it and stuck with it for years. So that's maybe an example of wish I had played it then rather than later. But, I'm kind of glad I got into it when I did, because, I got into it at a time when a lot of my sort of friends and peers were also getting into it. And also at a time when I could express the way my kind of reaction to I had a ready vehicle that actually wanted me to write about the game. So it kind of, it connected people and me and the game to kind of like an instant kind of community of people kind of writing and talking about the game. And it was kind of like a more pleasant experience because of the time when I was discovering it right at the beginning of that game's life as Dota 2, right at the beginning of a load of people having a similar experience, making friends and so on through it. And so it was kind of like a perfect storm of things. And I kind of appreciate now when that's not going to happen, basically, because people aren't quite all getting into things at the same time. And when it does happen, it's a really nice thing. That's my take on that nice thing.
I remember hearing a lot of games journalists talk about how great Dark Souls was to play back when it was only games journalists playing it, because it had a sort of mythical quality where there was no wiki. You could look up the answers to things, and so you had to just talk to individual people and say, did you ever do this, and how does this work?
I think that's why that first generation of people who reviewed it back when no one knew what the hell it was such fierce advocates for it, because they had the perfect experience of it. Similarly, I think that also applies to the people who kind of quote unquote got Destiny 1 despite its flaws immediately after it came out, tended to become advocates for it because the reviews were very mixed, but then it had this end game that was really weird and the raids that were amazing, and any sort of people kind of formed an attachment to it, which again is one of those kind of like you had to be there things. It's maybe a topical thing to say a week before Destiny 2 comes out, but on PC. But yeah.
I think I would have liked to have... I think it would have been nice if Andromeda had come out just after Mass Effect 3 while I was still sort of had an appetite for games of that length or type. Like, because I found myself in the situation of I really loved the Mass Effect trilogy, and I felt like I wanted to play Andromeda, but I just didn't. And so it would have been quite nice to still have that enthusiasm and stuff for that world and for those, you know, those ideas, to actually make the most of that. But other than that, like, I think it's quite nice to just sort of, I think when I don't play stuff, it's because I'm not really very interested, and I tend to find that with a lot of AAA, and because that's where the real time sinks are, I can usually fit other things in, or they've passed their time and they're not interesting in the same way anymore. And so, you know, it's not like I'm sort of seeking to carve out 50 hours to play a CRPG, or, you know, like, you know, AAA is kind of a weird definition at that point, but you know what I mean, like a kind of more traditional big game, or an event game, I guess is more what I mean. Or, you know, a big RPG, like, I know that The Witcher is highly rated and there's a lot that interests me about it, but I just haven't found the kernel of wanting to play it.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of life thing.
Because I really love indie tiny things, so, you know, then you can pick those up and play them and actually slot them in, which is quite nice.
Next up, James writes, Dear to the Darn Acrobat crew, which I think is a Crate and Crowbar anagram, which is very clever, if so. And if it isn't, you convinced me that it was an anagram, and I didn't try.
I'm a Darned Crafts Show is an anagram of my name.
Is it?
Yep.
Hang on, no, because Chris told us what the anagram for your name was.
Is it Neberjoth?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of us doesn't understand how anagrams work.
I completely concur.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. Last week you were discussing the inevitable decline of society due to addictive apps, but while I've undoubtedly had similar experiences of procrastination, I've also found the game elements of some things to be really beneficial, becoming more active with Fitbit, learning languages with Duolingo, and overcoming social ineptitude with Tinder and Bumble. Are there any game-like apps that have helped you improve as people, or are there any parts of life that you want an app for? Thanks for podding, everyone. James, I should note, he puts air quotes around learning and in the context learning languages with Duolingo, which I think is completely correct, because I too have spent quite a lot of time with Duolingo, and I like learning languages, but at the same time, you sort of sort of learn languages at Duolingo, which I think scare quotes is about as far as I'd go in terms of criticizing it. But yeah, it certainly tells you how to say, we drink because we have to, in like 3 different languages, which is,
It's one of the first things I need when I go to a new country.
Exactly.
My mum actually got into Duolingo, and she is not a gamer at all. But she was explaining to me how the game aspects of it work, and I was amazed at how quickly her mind immediately leapt to how to game it. It was just like straight away she could tell you how to get the most points and to exploit the systems.
I also got a lot of benefit out of Fitbit, although I found that Fitbit was mostly useful for sort of setting, helping me understand a kind of baseline of like exercise and calorie intake that I feel like I now have a handle on. Like I've gotten lazier with like meticulously recording everything and so on. But I know from weighing myself that that's not how to, like, I lost a lot of weight at the start of this year, and and I've regained some of it, but I've sort of not totally backswung, even though I stopped using the same gadgets. And I think that's just because the apps and the gadgets were helpful to kind of set a new set of expectations for me personally. And I don't feel the need to kind of still religiously stick to them. Those are my kinds of apps, I think, really. I don't want something that I have to have every single day forever, or else I'll lose that thing. Yeah. I want something that will help me learn through repetition and then let me go, like Lassie.
I had the same thing with
like a thinner Lassie.
Lassie gets increasingly thin the further away she runs.
Yeah. It's like a kind of weight Doppler.
I had a similar thing with...
She gets really fat as she runs past you.
But then gets really thin as she gets further away.
And also turns blue.
Like, the panting gets more intense and strained. This is a weird...
She kind of sounds funny as well.
Yeah, like, what's that, Lassie?
No, I genuinely didn't hear because the Doppler effect.
Yeah, exactly. Tim is full of no.
Stop and then repeat it. Call me later.
Stop. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was, I used a calorie counting app for a while, and I had basically the same experience, which is like, it was really informative and useful. And I used it for about 2 months. And then, the first month was all like discovering, oh my God, that thing is like really bad for me and not that great anyway. And this other thing is like really delicious and totally fine nutritionally. And then after a month of doing that, you discovered all the things you're going to discover. And, you really you settled into a good rhythm, and then you don't really need to be counting it. Like, I just got to the point where I'm counting it up every day, getting the same results.
Well, exactly
basically the same thing.
You're like, wow, pizza's really bad. But I love pizza. And that's just a personal little set of loyalty missions I need to go on. Yeah, incidentally, I'm sorry I can't hear you because of Doppler, Lassie. Is it a perfect example of a Duolingo kind of boss stage translation task?
If you can't say that in Spanish, you don't know Spanish.
Exactly. In terms of, like, apps I wish existed, I don't know really. Like, I use to-do lists extensively. I'm a real list maker. 'Cause otherwise I forget things. Mm-hmm. And, which is something I said for Pip's benefit, which is why she's giggling now. But that's not really like apps. That's just a digital thing that takes over for writing things down on a piece of paper and makes certain things easier to remember. Like auto-populating lists are a fun thing for me. I made my own spreadsheet for being a freelancer, which I think was a good thing, and it's helped make my life more pleasant and manageable now that I'm working for myself. But I don't need an app for that. I find that those sorts of things, like where I can make my own tool, I would far, far rather make it myself and make something that specifically addresses the life need I have, which is like, because there are, if you Google or whatever, you will find or App Store search, you'll find a million apps that offer you to do anything. But when it's an imperfect match, I find that very frustrating. Yeah. And I don't want to change my life to fit a nicely made app. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's a real edge case.
That's why I made Tom's Timer, which is that thing
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like, it just ticks away in your taskbar and tells you how many minutes since you last clicked it. and then you click it when you want to reset. I've been using that lately. And yeah, it's, taking a 5-minute break every half an hour is quite a good thing. My kitchen got really fucking clean when I started doing that. I don't, like, if it's a 5-minute break from screens, I got nothing. Like, I'm just gonna tidy my house. That's the only other thing I know how to do.
Yeah, thank God for painting for me, basically. Like, different way to procrastinate.
Podcast is the other thing, but like, I still never really just sit there and listen to a podcast and usually doing something else as well.
Yeah, getting Siri to put podcasts on is definitely like the sign that I'm cleaning. Any apps you particularly gotten mileage out of, Pip?
I don't know. I mean, like, possibly not in reference to the question. I mean, I use my Fitbit and stuff, but that's more just as a kind of, like, because I don't use all of it, and I don't really follow it in a kind of religious, like, in a kind of obsessive or even particularly useful way. I just sort of have it on me, and if it buzzes to say I've met my step goal, that's nice, but I'm just letting it passively collect data, I guess, in case there is something in that. But I don't know. I think maybe it's just different life experiences, and, obviously, there's a certain amount of sort of media, I guess, bias in terms of what magazines aimed at teenage girls will cover. So things like the amount of exercise you need to do to burn a certain number of calories is things that has been ingrained in me for possibly a lot longer, or, how many calories are in a particular thing. Like, women's magazines love a food swap. Like, it's kind of like, here's what you can substitute a chocolate bar for, if you want to have a sneaky treat, but still lose weight. And it's like, like 2 squares of dark chocolate because blah, blah, blah. Like, they'll insert some like science or whatever. Or, like, why not have a slice of apple covered in peanut butter? It's like, what a treat. Things like that, like, and I don't want to like do down the people who might find that stuff genuinely useful or like struggle with treats or whatever, but
a handful of nuts.
Exactly, yeah.
I always recommend a handful of nuts in it. I'm always like, happy substitute.
But not too many, because nuts are actually really dense in terms of the, like, they actually give you a surprising number of calories, and so blah, blah, blah. And like,
everything that's promoted to me as like good fats, is something I would happily substitute some of the lean things I eat for. But I would not substitute any of the bad fats I eat for that. Like, a handful of nuts is not a substitute for a chocolate.
But yeah, so like, I think that might be one of those things where like, I use it because it's kind of useful to augment some of the things that I do, but I don't think it's been educational in the same way, just because of, that's how that stuff works. And I've never, like, I think I've used things like Duolingo, but not that particular thing. But I mostly just have actual like, what is it, like, game apps, or I have, photography stuff or drawing stuff or, like that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I've never really been into like Foursquare or anything like that. Can't think of, no. Maybe Google Maps, because it does that thing where you can actually just type now, like, restaurants near me or something, and it'll just throw up a bunch of suggestions, and that's been actually useful a few times.
I heard someone say that for them, Google Maps is now showing calorie counts. So say,
no, I'd
if
be
I
off
walk
that
here, like, you can take a taxi, or if you walk, you'll burn like fucking 15 calories. Maybe that's the depressing thing, is that exercise calorie counts are always really, like, sadly low.
I think that's the thing, is like, it's quite, that stuff can be quite intrusive, so that concerns me. I'd need to ask for that, like, rather than it being a thing
maybe it
that
is an
suddenly
opt-in
flashes onto my phone. I know it does the price thing, like, it'll tell me how much a thing will probably cost relatively, but yeah, like, I really think that pushing the amount of calories something costs in people's faces is dangerous. Like,
If
really
you just-
dangerous.
If you just walked to Canada, it would have burnt like 500,000 calories.
Well, this is the thing, like, I think, like, you put calorie counts on food and on... Anyway, this is a separate rant. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but anyway.
Next is James... Oh, no, it's not. It's Michael, who writes... And it's getting confusing. I thought it was James. It's actually Michael. Michael writes, Dear Beer Boxes and Bird Boozers, why are plot missions? Love the show, Steve. Michael. P.S. For Halloween, will Heat Signature's skeleton crews be actual skeletons? And what does Tom F. have against undead employees anyway? Yeah, Tom F.
The cadence that you put on Love the Show, Steve, was interesting.
I just...
Super interesting.
There's a lot to unpack in this question. It's a praiseworthy short question. We like short questions.
Yeah, 4 words.
There's also a lot going on.
Yes, this is positive reinforcement for the short questions.
Yeah. Which is not to say that a long question can't be great, but it is, as I have said, I think a couple of episodes ago, much more likely that we'll read out your question if that's what you would like when you write to us.
Especially if we've been droning on a while.
Yeah, if it's snappy. Because God knows we're not.
I can explain the heat signature skeletons thing. That is a reference to the fact that if a ship in a heat signature mission has a small crew, there is a note about it saying, this ship is running a skeleton crew. Few guards, not skeleton guards. And so this questioner is suggesting that we make them skeleton guards.
It's a really good idea, Tom.
It's a good idea. That's all I'll say.
It's funny that you think the phrase skeleton key is not like a really small, barely necessary key, is it?
Yeah. It's a very useful key.
Yeah. It's
Opens them all.
So in that context, the skeleton is the most useful thing in the world. And I would posit a skeleton is one of the most useful things to have.
I can't get better without mine. I've tried.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder where skeleton key comes from. I'll look that up. When we're
Yeah.
done.
There's a really good song by Dessa called Skeleton Key.
Because maybe it's kind of like at the core of all keys, there's like a fundamental building block.
It's just a rod. If I had to extrapolate the thing all keys share, it's just that rod part.
Sorry, for some reason. No, that's dumb. Why did my mind go there? For some reason, my mind went to the phrase "Baram root you" from Babe Sheep Pig, the phrase that allows him to control all sheep. The skeleton key.
Sheep.
Isn't it just a sheep hack?
Yes.
Because you're not jamming it into a sheep, are you? Oh,
Jamming
sorry.
it into their ears?
Pip phrase of the week, everybody.
Oh.
If it doesn't work, you can just put your glowing blue hand on their face and then they work for you.
How amazing would it be?
Toasted cheese sandwich.
How amazing would it be if like, Talion leans into an uruk and says, like, Baram you. And then they win the sheep herding competition.
Oh my god.
The best uruk herder in the world.
Plot of Babe?
Yeah. Have you not seen Babe?
You know I haven't, and then you were like, we should watch it, and now you've just spoiled it.
That's not Babe's spoiler.
Yeah.
Not
They
really.
win the sheeping contest.
If you're not clear on that from the first, 20 minutes of Babe, you're not following.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah. I thought it was Blade Runner you hadn't seen, but I guess it's both.
It's Babe Runner.
Babe Runner.
Things.
Blade Runner, Pig in the City.
We had this whole conversation.
Babe Runner, Pig in 2049.
You should have added this to one of your lists.
Oh, I actually want to make
In
Babe
pens
Runner.
interlinked.
Yeah. And there's just a goose in it called Ryan. A little goose. Anyway.
Oh, we didn't answer.
Why are plot missions was the question.
Yeah.
For campaign.
Don't know. There are people who like them, I guess. People who want story and missions and need those two things to be combined.
It depends how you want to tell a story. Through the interactive
it's really
medium.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the...
Pip, on a scale of 1 to completely fucking checked out, how checked out do you feel right now?
I'm so tired. I haven't slept in days.
Sleep now.
Well, no, but I mean, it feels a bit like without an actual, like, we have entirely praised the brevity of this question, but it also now feels like I'm struggling to hook it into, because obviously some games do use plot missions in interesting ways, or that's a logical way for them to tell their story. And then sometimes they feel entirely ridiculous or like repetitive or bad or not well thought out or whatever, and so it's kind of, I don't know how to answer this because
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they're good when they're good and they're bad when they're bad, and they're a little bit in between.
In Shadow of War, the problem is not that that they're plot related. It's that they want to script things and they have a movie scene to tell and they want you to play it, and those two things don't go well together. And so when you try things that they didn't anticipate in the movie scene, they cancel the mission and fail you and set you back to a checkpoint, which is just bullshit and terrible.
I think that's the worst.
And you can just make, it's less cinematic, but you can just have a plot reason for you to be doing a game thing. The game thing is to kill an orc. It doesn't fucking matter how I do it. I can just use the entire world to my advantage. I can use every skill in the entire game. There's no restrictions on that. And so all you need is to write a plot that involves killing a series of orcs. And your game is perfectly set up.
It's almost like, in order to avoid some form of disharmony.
Some sort of disconnect between...
Yeah, like a dis something. I don't know what you'd call it. You need to match your narrative to your... match your story to your game.
Yep.
To avoid... game story
Disconnect.
bad times. Otherwise you end up with the game story bad times, and no one likes that.
Nope.
I mean, I guess there's a broader point here about the critical path, about having a game, not just plot stuff, but having games that fluctuate in terms of making you do something, like taking away power, basically. Like, games can start narrow because they're teaching you and then open up. But then most of the time it's unsatisfactory to then have them close again, unless you have a really spectacular plot reason for doing that. And that's the experience that the player is genuinely up for, right? Is having their power taken away as well as given to them. And often these narrowing of games into plot missions is framed by giving the player more power that they can only have temporarily. Like, we're going to give you a tank for a bit, or we're going to give you a big monster to ride around on for a bit to do a plot thing. But that is in itself unsatisfactory because you're not expanding your power set within the sandbox of the rest of the game. Depends on context. I'm thinking primarily of open world games here where they kind of give you a toy for a bit and then take it away again, and then, you know.
I think
don't do a bad game is what I'm saying.
I think one of the things that I find really frustrating is when it's like, when there's that tension between when the game designers clearly wanted you to play a certain way, but then gave you just enough freedom that you could sort of chafe at the edges of that. And so it's kind of like, they clearly kind of want you to perform it in the way that they've envisioned. But like, if you just happen to not be that person, or if you chafe against that because their story isn't very good or something, you know, like, I'm not going to call anyone out because, you know, it's more of a general thing that you'll sort of find every now and again, and it's not necessarily true the entire way through a game either. But like, I think that's the part that really bugs me about plot missions, is it's kind of like, look, you either wanted this to be a cutscene and I am your audience, or you let me play. You cannot successfully do both. And, you know, it's at that point when it's like, you know, when you've got the quest giver constantly popping up in your UI, just being like, hey, it's over here. What's that? You know, like, why are you going over there? Have you mentioned the main quest anytime soon? 'Cause, we should probably be getting on with that one. Or, you know, it's like, oh, for God's sake, either let me play or don't.
Quite
so. Or else you risk the story game
bad times.
Next, a person writes, Dear Crate and Crowpears, you've landed. I should stress a person on the internet. I shortened it to a person, but I knew who I meant. What I meant was a person on the internet. Writes, Dear Crate and Crowpears, You've landed on Plunkbat Island, but there's not a weapon in sight. Everything's been replaced with fruits and vegetables. Which fruit and or veggie would you wield as a weapon and why? Thanks for all the delicious podtatoes. You're all sublime. Cheers. A person on the internet.
So there's that movie with Clive Owen where he uses a carrot a lot as a weapon. Is it called Shooter? Or Shoot 'em Up? Shoot 'em Up. It's called Shoot 'em Up.
It's a misleading sell for what the movie is subsequently.
He does shoot people as well, but the carrot is also a good melee weapon for him. Kills several people with that.
And if it's good enough for Clive Owen.
Can I have a coconut? Is that allowed?
Yeah, you can have a coconut.
Okay, thanks.
It's a nut, I think.
It is a nut, but didn't he say fruit or vegetables?
Yeah, that's true. Are nuts either of those things? I've never been clear.
Pip, do you know?
No,
I thought they were like...
they're nuts.
Is it
nuts.
Consider the peach. I feel like the thing in the middle of a peach and an almond are very similar.
You actually can use peach shells, I believe, to make amaretto. I mean, like Disaronno and stuff. So actually, because I was checking on it for my sister because she needed to know if it had nuts in for a nut
You need to make amaretto in a very very stringent situation.
I'll just make a weird amaretto and drink that. And use that to forget the pain of the fact that I don't have a coconut. I'm just thinking a coconut's like the hardest thing I can think of that fits into that whole, like, I mean, obviously smaller nuts also are hard, but they don't really have the mass to inflict real damage.
What percentage of the population has a serious nut allergy?
I don't.
No, I don't know. I don't know why I'm acting like I'm thinking. That no amount of self-reflection is going to solve this for me.
Just,
5.8%.
Just thinking, in terms of the lethality of a vegetable.
You'd have to get them to consume it, right? Or
yeah, but I'm saying that's probably going to be easier than killing someone with a pear.
How many people do you think that I have met?
In your life?
Yeah. Thousands, maybe.
At least 25.
25 people.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking because I know 2 people with serious nut allergies.
Okay, so we've established it's 1 in 12.
No. No, I'm just thinking in terms of like, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's too rare to be a useful plunk bag weapon. Okay. Also, we established that nuts were out.
Also,
of actual fruits
tend not to be the major allergy kind of cause.
No, I wasn't thinking of causing allergies with them. I was going to hit people with them.
But I think that's where Chris was going.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. Well, the question was...
If you can have all nuts, then yeah, other nuts.
All nuts.
Because if you are going to do the allergy method, I think a smaller nut is actually better because you want to you'd shell it yourself and then you try and shove it in your mouth.
Sure. You go with peanuts, right?
Well, you just, you'd maybe pass it through a cremulator and then just throw the dust in someone's face.
You also need to find a cremulator. Just that is rarer than a 4X
you have one of those.
Anyway.
You really could kill someone with a cremulator.
Well, no, because you're putting bits of person in. It would take a while. And also, it's probably not, set up to take, wet matter.
Wet tissue.
Sorry, you appear to be wet matter.
Anyway.
Of the actual fruits and vegetables, so fruits, pineapple seems most offensive. Or maybe mango. Mango's a very leathery skin. It's quite hard to reach the skin of a mango. But it doesn't have a lot of solid mass unless it's very unripe. I guess really unripe fruits are going to do better.
Well, that's basically just throwing a rock, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean any of these fruits versus a potato. Potato's pretty solid.
And also a potato isn't going to go soft in the way that fruit does.
Yeah, depending on how long this fight lasts.
I'm just thinking, especially if you've got bananas in the mix, they kind of cause other fruit to ripen faster as well. So
if you're carrying an arsenal of pineapples and mangoes, don't also put a bunch of bananas in there.
I would
might super ripen them.
I would have a durian. Because those things smell fucking disgusting.
Hey, what about avocado? Not for the whole fruit, but you take the stone out. Stone is pretty big.
Well, so is a mango
rock
stone.
Solid. Yeah.
And
mango stone is
kind of
sharper, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's more like a frisbee, so you could really mess with someone.
We were asked to pick one.
Well, I'm not picking one.
Okay, that's fine.
Just not. I'm leaving.
No, I'm not picking one. I'm going to pick a few because as somebody who used to work in an exotic fruit and veg shop,
Of course you did.
obviously, I would probably pick maybe something like, I was thinking about prickly pears because they're technically bits of a cactus.
Can we just have a whole cactus?
Well, no, because so the prickly pears are really painful for you personally to pick up. I used to have to wear gloves when handling quite a lot of them because like the little spines would break off and get stuck in your skin, kind of like splinters, but really, really sharp. And so like I was thinking that I would attach some of those by the prickles into a cucumber and turn it into, what's one of those
Club.
things? Like a mace, like a spiked club, or like a baseball bat with nails in it. You know, it's like that's the basic principle.
You hate
at
cucumber.
work here. So I can still bend it to my will. Like, I'm not
Don't bend it.
eating
You want it to be straight.
Like, why would I eat it? It's my weapon.
Is a loofah as fruit or vegetable?
No, it's a plant. It's an animal, isn't it? It's like a sponge.
Oh God,
creature.
is it not vegetarian?
Oh wait, no. Like it is a. Yeah, it's a plant, isn't it? Sorry.
Is the coral reef vegetarian? If
No.
I eat the coral reef,
No, they are creatures.
I can't believe you ate the Great Barrier Reef. Successive heat signature has gone to your head.
Do you know what? I'm going
I want to start by saying this is not my first concern, but one of my concerns is
I've accidentally
Is this
eaten the Great
vegetarian?
Barrier Reef.
Chris, could you check
Tommy,
on
not
the
vegetarian.
loofah situation?
I'm not vegetarian. No. So that's one of the reasons it's not my first concern.
Could you check on the loofah situation?
No.
I'm interested. Oh, okay. Fine. I'll look it up afterwards. I just thought it might be interesting. People could
It's left as an
learn a
exercise.
I
for
just
the
don't
reader.
want to have to attempt to spell it.
Loofah.
That's how it is.
So yeah, I definitely wouldn't have got that right. I would have
Type
spelled
in
it like Ryan Johnson's film, but with a H, not a PH. Yeah, exactly.
I'll check it on my phone, and you know that will make the noise.
Exactly. It's where you you encounter like a different version of yourself that has a loofah. I don't know. I don't have a punchline here.
If you won't look it up, I'm going to check on my phone, and that might make the noise.
That's fine.
Bruce Willis just scratching. I want to say the other guy's name, but I can't remember the other guy's name. The Third Rock from the Sun kid,
Third Rock from the Sun, mate.
Gordon-Levitt.
Yes.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I can only say Jason. I knew that wasn't right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, they apparently are a genus of tropical and subtropical vines in the cucumber family.
Right. Oh, that's the cucumber family. Okay, I feel like that's allowed in vegetables.
Yeah, but what damage are you going to do with a loofah?
Oh, I hadn't thought that far ahead.
Right.
No, it was to put your prickly pear on. I was thinking something better than a cucumber. I just imagine this cucumber
I
breaking as soon as you
see.
swipe with it.
Yeah. What, I'd want something with a bit of give, or like...
Loofah's pretty rigid. Like you can, I feel like I've swung a loofah in anger.
So,
Not with a load-bearing
so
payload at the end.
And not with lethal intent.
Brussels sprouts actually come on, like big, long, quite thick stalks.
They do, yeah.
So
it's true.
maybe I could get
Even
one of
broccoli has a bit of a
those
stem to
and-
it.
Yeah, but like, yeah. so
Broccoli's
I'm
more of a
thinking-
close range weapon.
You know, they're the same.
Brussels sprouts longer
You know,
range.
they're the same plant.
Are they?
Broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts are all different mutations of the same thing.
Well, it's-
Is that not true?
I don't think that's true. I think they're part
an
of the
interesting
same
fact. It's not
family.
true.
It's not a...
I'm pretty sure they're...
Kale and cauliflower are not, like, they're not... they're probably, like, I think they might all just be, like, part of the...
Let's say...
But they're all cruciferous, aren't they?
I-
No, wait, they're not. No!
Okay, well,
Whenever I eat broccoli, I like to imagine it's just a very soft tree.
what? Is bamboo a fruit?
This question has broken us.
Basically, I think what I would do is I'd take a single apple, and then I would plant that apple in the soft earth. And then
How long of a punk back game is this?
It's a long fucking plunk bag game. And then I would start my own life on Plunk Bag Island. I'd hide during the day and come out at night to water and nurture my apple tree. And then over the course of years, presumably when we get back to final couple, and obviously if the blue circle isn't around my apple tree,
It's kind of
oh boy, Am I fucked? Well, if it's not around my apple tree, I'm just gonna go screaming naked into the wilderness and try and beat people to death as God intended in Plunk Bad. But, if we get to that point, whatever. And then when the tree grows, I will fell the tree, and from the wood of the tree, craft a crossbow.
Doesn't need to be an apple tree. Are you going to use the pips as cyanide for the poison of the bolt?
That's a great idea. And then
You are right.
Am I right?
They're all the same species, different cultivars, apparently.
Wow.
Fucking.
And they're all soft
That's
trees.
cauliflower facts.
But they,
Boy.
I mean, they are all cruciferous. But yeah, they are all Brassica oleracea, I believe, is how you maybe pronounce that.
I want to give a shout out to my boy fellow Chris Higgins, who pointed that out on Twitter the other day. And I was
Good
taking
content.
a little gamble then on him not making that up.
That's really cool. Well done. No, that's awesome.
Yeah, alright. Better believe it.
Well,
That's a real broccoli fact.
I'm
And
genuinely
you can't deny it.
interested.
You tried, you hated, and you were wrong.
I think bamboo is not a fruit. Not because the plant cannot produce fruit, but just because the thing that we refer to as bamboo is like the trunk, basically. It's like the...
Basically, what can you make a
wooden
spear out
stem
of is
bit.
my kind of...
Yeah,
thinking
it would be
here.
good. I mean, yeah, so what... Yeah, it comes down to like the borderline between... Because if you have like an apple, often there's the stalk attached to it. That bit's a little bit hard. I'm not saying you can kill someone with just that. But, I think Pip's Brussels sprout suggestion is a good loophole where like the hard bit of the plant is kind of included in the Brussels sprout sometimes. Mm. Don't boil it, obviously. You're undermining your advantage there. Just pissing it away. For the sake of slightly better Brussels sprouts.
Oh, God.
I genuinely can't believe how much mileage we've got out of this episode. That has
good question.
almost nothing to
It's
do
a
with
good question
PC
because there's
games.
no obviously good answer.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I've also just looked up nuts.
To be honest, carrots are not looking that bad to me after all.
Yeah, I was just
Haven't
thinking,
really
I
found
was just
anything
thinking
a lot better than
exactly
carrots.
that.
And Wikipedia, actually, I mean, you might want to double
Parsnip
check this.
could work.
Says, a nut is a fruit composed of an inedible hard shell and a seed which is generally
I
edible.
thought that was the case.
So that's interesting.
That's great. I can have my coconut.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to my coconut. Because even if, like, I'd break it on the first enemy, and then afterwards I'd use the shards to, like...
To pretend to be a horse and threaten people.
No, it's not going to break cleanly in two.
You can kill me, but the cavalry's coming.
I can see you doing that. I'm just going to beat you with my Brussels sprout stalk until you stop doing that.
Oh dear. That is all the questions we have time for, apparently. It's actually quite a lot more time than we thought we had for questions. But it turns out some things just get you going. Those things are fruit and vegetables. Pip,
Yes.
hi.
I am listening.
Okay.
I was also just looking at pictures of nuts. I mean, no, I was...
Hey!
Oh!
You didn't have to explain yourself.
I mean, like, biological pictures of...
No, not that.
like, diagrams...
Save failed.
Of the food stuff / actual, like, non-testicular nut. Oh! Why? I was listening as well. This is the worst. Why does this happen?
If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us the questions at crateandcrowbar.com. If you would like to hang out with our community, you can do so on Discord. Link to our Discord channel will be in the show notes and on our website, crateandcrowbar.com, and the top bar thing where the Discord lives. The podcast can also be found on YouTube along with our spin-off series, Bloodborne. Our Bloodborne playthrough. Sorry, Pip just done a face.
Bloodborne.
Why? Oh.
On youtube.com/crateandcrowbar. The podcast and its spin-offs are very kindly supported by our Patreon backers. Huge thank you to everyone who does back us on Patreon. Your support lets us kind of do more pod stuff, including some stuff I'll get onto very briefly. But if you'd like to find out more about our Patreon, you can do so Patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Pip and I this week. Pip's waving.
For God's sake, I'm trying to find ways to communicate that I'm paying attention without you, like, drawing attention.
I thought you were waving to our listeners.
No, I was doing a kind of, hello, I'm listening, kind of, you know. Yes.
In many cases, that could be a given, but not here. This week we started a fun little spin-off, which is called Little Grey Cells, which is Pip and I's podcast about Poirot.
What, may I ask, is the origin of the title?
Poirot is always referring to his little grey cells.
Ah, I see.
They are working or they are not, depending on his status in assembling people into a drawing room to identify murderers. But yes, so we're going to do a little podcast for every episode of Poirot, the ITV adaptations thereof, specifically. A podcast. That was the other name we rejected.
For good reason.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a little bit of a departure from our gaming norms, but I hope you enjoy it. I think it's fun, and we had fun making it, and we'll do more of them, won't we, Pip?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Tom might be on.
Yeah.
Might join us for a little Poirot chat, because I love him.
We could have Belgian waffles with our Belgian waffles.
Oh my god. I have...
Oh, that's pretty good.
I know, I have French waffles. What are the ones that are just really compact and have syrup in between already?
Oh, the stroop waffles.
Stroop
waffles. I have stroop waffles, if that's any help.
Swiss?
I feel like
No,
Dutch.
Dutch.
The ones I have are from France, but I think it's a Dutch invention. Doesn't help with Belgian at all. It's just, Poirot's just looking at it as just nonplussed.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, are they Dutch? They are Dutch, aren't they?
I think they're Dutch. I first had them in Holland. But...
yeah.
Everyone remembers when they first had a stroop waffle.
And that name sounds very Dutch, doesn't it? Stroop waffle.
Yes.
Write in, tell us, where the fuck is a stroop waffle from? Something we could easily Google, but haven't.
It's not that far from Luftwaffe.
Tom! It is, all of the letters are different.
Just in terms of phonetics.
What was that? What did he say?
Luftwaffe, which I know is German.
What?
Stroopwaffe, Luftwaffe.
What, did you think that Luftwaffe
I have
just
to end
meant
this
loft
podcast.
waffle or something?
No, it wasn't supporting evidence for it.
Like that there was just somebody like high up waving some waffles in the air as if they are making plane noises.
We have to somehow find a way of landing this podcast from that.
What, with your fucking Luftwaffles?
No, we're not getting onto Luftwaffe.
99 Luftwaffles, the classic song by Nena.
Oh my god, this has gone so
99
wrong and weird.
Luftwaffe. What are we talking about? How did we get here?
Poirot is illogical.
Poirot. We're doing a podcast about Poirot.
We're doing
now.
a podcast
About Poirot. Also, I genuinely don't know where I was in this outro.
If you want to follow us on... Oh.
No, there's something I wanted to say.
Right.
And maybe this is the wrong time to say it, honestly.
Are you leaving?
Like, fuck this.
That's the right time to say that.
No, I wanted to say, because it occurred to me that, we haven't said this in a while, but if you like the podcast, God help you, but, any reviews or ratings you leave on iTunes are genuinely very useful for, making us appear to people when they look for podcasts about games. It is that simple. And so if you do like the podcast and you haven't left a review and you use iTunes as your podcatcher, then that's really appreciated. Obviously, if you choose not to, that's fine as well. But just thought I'd say it because other podcasts say it and I just realized why it's important.
Like, rate, subscribe.
No.
Follow.
Don't worry about that. Don't do those things. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, though.
You have just run through all of the ways that people can do the thing that I just said.
Well, yeah, but you made it sound skeezy.
I was trying to make it sound soothing and professional.
Oh.
That's upsetting. Why is this this outro's gone so badly for me? You can follow us on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar.
We already established that. What if you wanted to follow us as individuals, Pip?
No, well.
How would someone follow you?
Oh, maybe they shouldn't.
They're going to be picking favourites after this.
At Philippa War.
How do you spell that?
PHILIPPAWARR.
Damn skippy, Tom.
I am at Pentadact on Twitter. PENTADACT.
Perfect. And I'm on Twitter at C Thurston. That's CTHURSTEN.
Have you got a Halloween name?
No.
Okay. It's fine. We're done.
Do you?
No. I mean,
Neither do
it
I.
could be
We're
Philippa
just a bunch of
War.
regular folks.
What would it be if you did?
I said Philippa War, like as in...
I think I'd go for like Crypt Tombstone.
In the past, I think I've done one, but I only do it on Halloween Day itself, which is a waste of time because no one notices it then. And I've never really had a good one. But this year, I realized I've gone with versions of Tomb, right, for Tom.
You could be Tom Frankenstein's sister.
Yeah, and Frankenstein for the surname. But this year I realized I could have done Skeleton. Which frankly is better than Tomb for the first name. I still haven't, but...
No. Nor
there it is.
might we.
No. Anyway. Yeah.
Anyway.
Let's just draw a veil over this.
Indeed. Let's just slowly drag a sheet over this fractal tangent. And say...
Embalm it.
What?
We could embalm it and upload it, and then everyone... to bring it back to the more, a Mortician's Tale as a kind of game of the week.
Shove it in the cremulator.
I'm adding.
Shove it in your cremulator. It's time to end the podcast.
I'm going to look at pictures of nuts. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
God knows you earned it.
Wah, 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 wah.